The Songsan Mountains boast 36 peaks, with Xiaomu towering above them all. Its steep slopes make it easy to defend and difficult to conquer, an ideal place for founding a sect. Mount Xiaomu is home to 3 martial arts schools, the Zhongyue sect in Dongshan, Dawang Temple in Nanshan, and Shaolin Temple at the very summit. The Zhongyue sect, a Taoist school, enjoys a stellar reputation. With numerous disciples and thriving endeavors, it stands as the largest sect in Songsan. Dawang Temple, one of the oldest monasteries, carries a legacy less illustrious than Zhongyue's. Whispers say its glory days have faded into history. Perched at the peak, Shaolin Temple languishes in decline. Within its vast halls dwell only 1 monk and 3 disciples. One night, atop Shaolin's main peak, the master sat in meditation. He told his disciples that self-cultivation was the path to fulfilling their spiritual journey. Abruptly, the master declared that he would die that night. Alarmed, the disciples pressed him for an explanation. He revealed that during meditation, he sensed his end drawing near. With little time left, he wished to share what would follow. One disciple protested, insisting this was no moment for jest. The master then turned to his disciple, Ichin. He described Ichin as pure-hearted and innocent, yet consumed by an obsession with martial arts, indifferent to all else. He urged Ichin to hold fast to this purity even after his passing. Overwhelmed, Ichin wept, his tears unstoppable. Another of the disciples at this moment thought that if the master was not joking about his death, then for the good of the Shaolin Temple, he would definitely choose the next abbot of the monastery. Naturally, he believed himself the worthiest candidate for the role. Meanwhile, the master turned to Kong, calling his name softly. He shared a verse from the Diamond Sutra. All facets are illusory. Only by seeing beyond the false facet could one behold the Tathagata. The master cautioned that Kong's obsession with outward appearances would cloud his clarity. Kong responded that he grasped the teaching. The master, as his guide, hoped Kong would immerse himself in Buddhist study, letting no attachments hinder his journey to enlightenment. The master then summoned Jie, noting that Jie had been clever since youth and had truly mastered his kung fu. Jie listened intently, absorbing every word. Suddenly, the master declared he was entrusting the abbot's position to him. The other disciples, stunned, stood frozen in disbelief. Jie, just as shocked, stood in awe. With tears streaming down his face, he extended his trembling hands to receive the master's prayer beads. Suddenly, Kong sprang to his feet, his voice sharp as he questioned how the master could make such a choice. The master, calm and resolute, affirmed that his decision was right and pleaded with them not to stir conflict for his sake. No sooner had he spoken than his body shattered, scattering like shards of glass in all directions. The disciples, hearts heavy, proclaimed their master dead. Meanwhile, in the real world, the city pulsed with evening energy, a time ripe for adventure. Hua Yunjin stood mesmerized, gazing through glass at a woman's form, drooling. Like a wild beast, he struggled to restrain his primal urges. Hua began to dance, proclaiming himself a splendid university student, both handsome and clever. He boasted of overcoming countless hardships and obstacles to win the affection of this stunning beauty. At last, he declared, his days of virginity would end. The young man could hardly contain his excitement for the moment. Suddenly, a breathtakingly beautiful girl emerged, calling Hua's name. She was both adorable and alluring, her presence captivating. Hearing his name, Hua rushed inside. He lunged toward the girl, proclaiming that today he was a beast, ready to devour her. The girl, caught off guard, grew cautious. In that instant, Hua vanished mid-leap, leaving only a scattering of his hair behind. Terrified, the girl screamed in horror. Meanwhile, at Shaolin Temple, Jie felt a strange disturbance, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. Kong, gazing at him, called him younger brother and said that with their master gone, it was time for the 3 of them to attend to serious matters. Hua, now within Jie's body, glanced around, bewildered. He noticed a statue of fate and unfamiliar people addressing him as little brother. Kong remarked that their sect, though small, still required a leader. Hua, observing closely, realized with a jolt that he was now a martial artist. He touched his head, then wailed in despair, mourning the loss of his lush, beautiful hair and crying out that it was all a cruel deception. Furious, Hua couldn't fathom why he had been displaced at such a pivotal moment. Others, he thought bitterly, were reborn as emperor's kin, nobles, or wealthy merchants. Why not him? He found himself a young, destitute monk, his master recently passed. Abruptly, a notification sounded. The temple abbot's system was initializing. Hua stood stunned, incredulous that a system existed here. A task board appeared before him, outlining his objectives. First, he must enhance the boy's skills. Second, he must elevate Shaolin Temple to the foremost martial arts sect. Third, he must establish Jie, the temple's abbot, as the leader of the world's martial arts. Hua's excitement surged, and he asked the system if task completion would yield wealth. The system assured him that as he fulfilled the tasks, it would diligently support his needs. Clasping the screen tightly, Hua begged the system to return him to his world, vowing to come back after pursuing his desires. The system cautioned that the return to Earth function was still locked. He must work diligently to complete his tasks. Frustrated, Hua demanded details about this unfamiliar world. The system admitted it lacked deep knowledge of the realm. The customs of this land resembled the ancient times of Hua's homeland, with thriving courts and martial arts traditions. Scholars and artists crafted plays and painted masterpieces, while martial artists clashed with fierce intensity. Few here enjoyed lives of peace and stability. In essence, only the strong could prevail. Hua rejoiced, grateful that he had inherited the previous occupants' memories in their entirety. He thought that if he could return to Earth, wouldn't it be better for him to live in this martial arts world with 3 wives and 4 concubines? Wouldn't he be happier that way? The system immediately informed him that he was an idiot, and if one of the quests failed, the owner would be killed immediately. Hua took a deep breath and thought that luckily he didn't immediately dive into vulgarity, and told the system that in that case, they could come to an agreement. He started tearfully begging the system to replace the first assignment with something else, since he doesn't want to practice the boy's skills. After a while, Kong reflected on the fact that the old monk had embarrassed him. Angry Kong went to his younger brother to say something to him. However, as soon as Kong turned to Jie, Jie replied to him that whether he imagined what a good fortune it was that the master had appointed him the next abbot of the temple, and everyone had heard about it. Hua was aware of the fact that while the old monk was alive, he had left his post to his second disciple Jie, and the elder Kong hated him. And then Kong could not object, for he respected the master. But now that the elder is dead, Kong won't wait a moment. Seeing the happy Jie, Kong said for I-Ching to at least say something to this boy. However, I-Ching was defeated at this time and couldn't listen to their conversations. Kong was even more angered by this. Kong then looked at Jie and said that the situation had fundamentally changed, and he thought it would be very fair to choose someone else among the 3 of them. Hua noticed that Kong was determined to gain power. Even when the master died, not a single muscle on his face trembled. It looked like the struggle for the temple abbot's position was inevitable. Also, Hua realized that Kong would have a chance to become the next temple ruler since it was said in the previous order. But Hua grinned and said to himself that it was a pity that this ordinance didn't make sense anymore. Hua then turned to elder brother Kong and asked why he thought master's decision was unfair. Then Kong jumped up and started shouting that because Jie doesn't watch his language, that he is stupid, raping and stealing, and in general, that he doesn't know the Dharma. Hua looked at him angrily and asked him that didn't he also have a chance to be the abbot of the temple. Kong was startled and replied that he didn't mean that. He noticed that Jie's aura had become completely horrible and frightening. He couldn't understand what was going on. He had the impression that he was looking at an enraged King Kong. Meanwhile, an exasperated Hua asked Kong that if he was so good at the Dharma, who was the Buddha's father. Kong was confused. He started going through different options in his head, recalling his knowledge, and replied that Buddha had no father. Hearing this, Hua said that the Buddha's father was King Qin Fang. Hua asked if Kong didn't know even the basics. The frightened Kong replied for him to ask something else as this question didn't count. Hua then asked who is the Buddha's mother. Kong immediately replied that it was Mrs. Maya, the wife of King Qin Fang. Hua angrily replied that this was the wrong answer. Kong asked how this was possible and whether Buddha was mortal. Hua told him that before becoming God, the Buddha was an ordinary mortal, and the king's wife was his biological mother, but not the Buddha's mother. Kong laughed and asked how that was possible. Then Hua asked him again who was the Buddha's mother. Kong replied that he had no mother. Hua began to shout that this was the wrong answer. He said that the Buddha was swallowed by a peacock but soon escaped from its body, and then he took the bird to Lingshan and thought it was his own mother. Hua shouted that Kong didn't even know the basics of Buddhism. Hua then grabbed Kong and asked him which of the 2 of them he thought was more suitable for the position of temple abbot. The frightened Kong replied that it must be Jie. Hua replied to him that this was incorrect. Kong then almost went mad and asked that did the Buddha think that his personality was more suitable than Jies? Hua replied that it was all lies, and that to the Buddha, all beings are equal. He, Kong, Ichin are all the same. Hua walked outside, his aura shining with a mesmerizing blue light, and he told Kong that only they could realize who was suitable. Kong was left completely bewildered. In the meantime, Hua went to the temple abbot's zen room. In the room, Hua looked at the system and said it was unrealistically cool, pulling something like this off. He knew he had a great advantage. Hua then sat down on the bed and said that he had gotten it from Kong and Ichin, and now he could finally see the features of the system. Hua thought that just like his previous life, this lottery system was like a wheel of happiness. The cell the pointer would point to would be his reward. The system has notified that the lottery has been activated and rewards will now be given out once a month. Hua knew that there were 36 cells, 6 of which were books with martial arts secrets, another 6 with scriptures, another 6 with Buddhist artifacts, another 6 construction books, and the remaining 12 sundries. Hua began to familiarize himself with each of the boxes to know the contents. When he reached the miscellaneous section, he learned that there was a ring knife, a pin, an oil lamp, a horse, an eagle, and so on. Suddenly, the system alerted that all 36 cells, secret martial arts books, scriptures, Buddhist artifacts, construction books, lanyas, and sundries were all selected randomly by the system. Then Hua clarified that it turns out that they would be different items in the next drawing. The system replied that they would be. Hua knew that among the 6 secrets of martial arts, the Bone Marrow Sutra is the most advanced, and hand strength is intermediate, and all the other books are of low level. Construction books teach how to build a building from scratch, but everything is described in general terms, so Hua wondered if he could build his temple on his own. He then smiled and said that this system was very interesting, and with these prizes he would be able to reach his goal even faster. And excited Hua started shouting that he couldn't wait any longer and jabbed his finger at the screen. The wheel of luck began to spin at an incredible speed. Hua watched curiously and said that it was very cool. The pointer almost stopped, and Hua began to shout that there was no need for scriptures. Although they are necessary for Buddhists, the Shaolin temple is too poor right now, so scriptures are better left for later. He knew that most of the items in this raffle were useless, except for one. And from his experience from his past life, the biggest prize in the whole roulette was 3 points of light. Hua looked at that wheel and told him to drink the grand prize. He begged it to stop at the right place. It was a real torment for Hua. The wheel kept spinning. Then the guy closed his eyes and said that according to the law of luck, he would definitely get the middle or top level prize. Then he noticed that the wheel was starting to slow down. He hoped the stop would be at the 5th or 6th cell. Hua was getting more and more nervous with each turn. He knew that some things weren't particularly useful for the temple, some things weren't as good as a construction token, and basic martial arts weren't necessary for any Shaolin monk. Suddenly, Hua shouted very loudly, "Stop!" Kong and Ichin who were nearby heard this strange roar. Meanwhile, the system congratulated Hua for obtaining a basic martial art, the Iron Head technique. Hua took a deep breath and thought that if he wanted to become the leader of the martial arts league, using this technique would definitely make him a laughingstock. Hua then clutched his head and said that before he returned, he would have time to be wholesome and wise, literate and virtuous, and rule for thousands of years. Although the Iron Head technique is a basic art, it takes a lot of hard work to learn it. Hua suggested that it might be necessary to use stones. Iron Head technique is a type of physical and internal strength. It uses physical strength to strengthen muscles and bones, and also the inner strength contained in the spirit of man to complement each other and achieve success. And if one were to develop an Iron Head technique, it would be stronger than any stone, which would shatter into small chips and iron slabs would split apart. This technique is invincible. Hua realized that this was wonderful. After a while, the tired and exhausted Hua exhaled in relief. He said that the martial arts secrets provided by the system were very convenient. And right now, he had not only learned the techniques, but also reached the highest level in this field. Hua now knew that with the combination of this technique and a little inner strength, his head would definitely become his main weapon. But until the need arises, he has decided not to reveal this secret to anyone, for he must first learn to control others. Hua noticed that after using it, the magic power of this book had disappeared, and now it had turned into an ordinary book with blank pages. He realized that of course he wouldn't be able to quickly create a group of martial artists because the system might not count it. At that time, the younger brother Yitzin came in and told his brother Abbott that it was time to cook. Hua replied that it was too early. Then they went outside, and Hua took a stone and told I Ching that he would show him something. And immediately after saying those words, Hua smashed a rock against his head. I Ching stood there in complete shock. Itsun started asking what this art was and that it was very impressive. Hua smiled and thought that he really was an idiot who understood absolutely nothing about martial arts. He then turned around and said that it was an iron head technique, and if I Ching listened to him, he would teach it to him in the future. Afterwards, Hua said that after he became an abbot, a realization came to him that he was now a different person and could no longer do cooking. I Ching asked what he should do now. Hua replied that it was very simple, and now I Ching was responsible for bringing water from the mountains and Kong for cooking. And after I Ching brings water, Hua will teach him the iron head technique in 10 days. I Ching almost died of happiness and said that his brother was very kind. Then a happy I Ching grabbed the buckets and ran, shouting that he would be back with water soon. Hua looked at him and thought he was just a carefree child. 2 days passed, and as the old monk got his well-deserved rest, Hua decided to go down to the foot of the mountain and look around for the future Shaolin temple. Hua walked forward, then came to the river, and suddenly felt a stomach ache. He had only eaten steamed buns and vegetables for the past 2 days, so his stomach ached. Shaolin temple is really too poor. In the past, when the old monk was alive, he would sometimes do things for people, earning a small amount to live on. But the old monk was gone, so Hua realized that now he had to train well and start earning money. Hua felt that it would be very easy, and when Shaolin starts to recruit a dozen disciples or even more, they will make a huge stage. And that way, they would be able to make money. Hua's other option was to recruit disciples. In the past, when Shaolin trained disciples, they worried about their future life. Only a few people joined the temple. However, very few people will be able to go through such harsh conditions to live. Hua realized that if he wanted to recruit disciples, he should start by becoming famous or offering excellent conditions. Otherwise, with so many different sects recruiting disciples, no one will show up for them. After all, why should people go to the mountains and live a hard life when they can choose a better place? While Hua was pondering all of this, he suddenly saw a girl in front of him. He looked at her carefully and realized that there was this little shepherdess in the past owner's memory. The girl was herding sheep and playing sweetly with her dog, when suddenly some man came up, and calling her by her name, Enro, ordered her to sing another song for his brother. The man then walked over and took the girl by the chin. He said she had better play with him now. At this point, the dog pounced on the man to protect the girl from the man. However, he managed to react in time and threw the dog away. Lin ran to her. The man told Lin to see what happens when she doesn't listen to them. The 2 men then grabbed the girl. The man told her that if she did not obey, she would be hurt. Lin asked them to let her go, and she would sing. Suddenly, the man was hit in the face. The blow threw him back several meters. Lin was shocked. Hua looked at the other brother at this time, and said that 2 grown men were trying to establish themselves at the expense of a weak girl. The younger brother immediately ran to his older brother and tried to help him. Lin meanwhile asked the monk what he was doing here. She said that he should run away from here faster since they are young guys from the village, and he is not an opponent for them. Lin asked him to call his brothers and sisters who knew martial arts. Hua realized that she thought he was weak. And then the elder brother came to his senses and started shouting that does this bald man want to escape. Then he shouted that those bald donkeys had gotten quite brazen, not only in the mountains, and they had better be careful or he would roll their heads and play soccer with them. Hearing these insults against him, Hua assumed an attack pose. The younger brother immediately started laughing. He told his elder that this bald ass thought he was the strongest monk and that this idiot should taste his punch. Suddenly, Hua accelerated and attacked him, hitting him with his head with all his might. The impact made his younger brother's teeth chatter. At this moment, Big Brother ran up and was about to strike from the back, telling this bald donkey to feel his strength. Hua meanwhile thought that only a real idiot would yell before attacking. Then he turned around and dodged his blow. The battle began, and Hua realized that this guy had a strong boxing technique and an unusual aura. And with Hua's weak inner strength, even with the iron head technique, it would be difficult to defeat him. Hua then carefully looked at Lin. He realized that this girl was the friend of the past body owner, so he can't show his weaknesses in front of her. Meanwhile, the elder ran at Hua with an outstretched fist. Hua was not confused and put his head up. The older man's arm broke from such a collision. Hua then ran up and grabbed him. The older man started apologizing. Hua slapped him and asked him how dare he hit on girls. Hua then told him not to call him monk, but to call him master. The elder began to apologize to the master and promised that it would not happen again. Thereupon Hua said to call him abbot. And then the elder begged the abbot's pardon and asked him to let him go. The younger one at that time was about to run away. Lin noticed it just in time and started yelling that he was running away. Hua looked and let the older man go, saying he could go too. Lastly, he told Hua that his older brother was a disciple of the Qing sect. He would come home in August and take revenge on him. Hua rolled his eyes and thought that of course if you beat the younger one, his older one would come along. It's a classic plot twist in conventional novels. Unexpectedly, Lin came over and asked Monk Jia why he was so reckless and what she would do if he was beaten up because of her. Then Hua smiled and replied that she was underestimating Abbott too much, and that in the online game, he had died over 100 times before he could even blink. Lin laughed and said that he was bragging again, and she also asked if he had just called himself an abbot. Lin said that such a thing could not be said, and one had to be careful, because if his master found out, he would definitely punish him. Hua asked her to stop, and told her that the most shameless Shaolin abbot was standing in front of her, and in the future when she met him, it was necessary to call him master. Lin was surprised and asked where his mentor was. Hua told her that his mentor had gone to the paradise of bliss. Lin cried and said that master was a wonderful person. Hua was horrified that she had cried. It was the first time he saw a girl crying. Hua asked her not to be sad and told her that the mentor had gone on a well-deserved vacation. Lin wiped away her tears and replied that she just couldn't control the flow of her tears. The girl then pulled out an apple and said that she had plucked it before and now she wanted to thank him. Hua accepted such a gesture and thought that she was really a very nice girl. Then he took a bite of the apple and thought that if this good, gracious sister was his friend, he must return to vulgarity. Under the Shaosher Mountain, there are several villages and small towns. But among these towns is the largest and most prosperous town of Lu. Every 15th day of the first Lunar New Year is market day in Lu City. Residents from the Zhou Kingdom come to sell or buy goods, and some just to have fun. Hua realized that with so many people, he was worthy of the title of the most prosperous city nearby. Hua walked through the market and thought about what a good day it was, perfect for promoting Shaolin. Suddenly, he heard passers-by whispering among themselves and saying how tattered his clothes were. Someone said that the old master of Shaolin Temple had passed away. He was a Shariputra, and all people with that title must take an oath that they will be reborn in another country. Hua turned around and noticed two men saying that Shariputra cannot be reborn in another country without any punishment. They also told us that if men and women feel well, Amitabha receives them and watches over them. This can last from 1 to 6 days. Hearing this, Hua realized that they were foreign monks who were lecturing at the foot of Mount Shaosher. They really don't believe in Shaolin's strength, so Hua decided to show them what he could do. By the way, the town of Lu is not within the Shaolin Temple and any monk can stay there and teach Buddhism. An exasperated Hua threw a couple of punches in the air and said that sooner or later everything would belong to him. The monks watched in amazement from the sidelines. Hua then calmed down and approached the monks. He addressed them as younger brothers and asked if there was anything he could do to help them. Since they were both talking about real Buddhism, which no one has ever appreciated at face value. The monks replied to Big Brother that the world has really changed and no one believes that their Zen sect is real. And they've been telling here for 2 hours, but they haven't received a single coin of donation. Hua smiled and said it would be better if they cooperated with him. And he would give them a show, and they would dress him up, and they would split the profits in half. One of the monks told the other that it looked like this guy wasn't going to hurt them. The other one replied that this was good, because he was afraid he would kick them out for breaking their rules. Then the monk asked Hua that they should just stand by and for that they would get half the profit. Hua replied that this was true, but it could be that he would not get any coins either. Hua then smiled and took the iron from them, on which he started banging loudly. Hua shouted to the whole market for the guests to come over if they wanted to listen to interesting stories. So one of the girls at the market started asking her mother to come over to listen to the stories. Her mother agreed. A crowd of people gathered around Hua. Some said that these monks were so strange. Instead of preaching scriptures, they told stories. And so Hua began his introduction. He asked the ladies and gentlemen if they had heard the story of the monk who studied without holy scriptures. This is an amazing person. He was born very handsome and talented. Even His Majesty the Emperor called the monk his brother. He rode a sacred horse, wore expensive robes, ate and drank from golden dishes. However, He believed that money, fame, and property were filth. So he wanted to go to the West to study the scriptures. The little girl asked in surprise what was next for the monk. He went on to say that he had become the most famous Tang Xian Taoist monk. The people were amused by such a story and began to ask for more story. Meanwhile, the monks were making Hua comfortable. Hua told us that when the world was created and the yin and yang trials began, the world was divided into 4 parts. And this story begins with a monkey from the part called Dong Shinzhou. Hua said that this monkey was very brave to anger the heavenly soldiers and generals. The crowd was laughing with laughter at the story. Then he told that the Tathagata had renounced the Jade Emperor and all the gods, had come out of the heavenly gate with 2 servants, and though everyone sympathized with him, no one could help him. So he recited a mantra and invoked the mountain of the 5 elements. Then he was imprisoned in a prison which was made in this mountain of 5 elements. And when he was hungry, he began to eat the iron balls lying around. When he was thirsty, he drank molten copper juice. And when the people took pity, they sent for him the one who saved him. Hua then looked at the people, smiled, and said that he would tell them a different story next. The woman then became indignant and told him that if he wasn't running out of stories, then he was making them up. Hua replied that they had originally come for them to give them alms, but now it was too late and they couldn't just leave and return to the temple with nothing. Hua bowed frustratedly and thought about them pouring their money into him already. The little girl went first and threw in a few coins. Then the rest of the people followed the girl. The monks were shocked at the amount of coins Hua had collected through his stories. Meanwhile, Hua told the people that Amit Baha would be with them because they were generous people and the poor monks would now be happier. And if anyone wants, they can visit them early tomorrow morning at the Shaolin temple. All the poor monks will be waiting for them. The crowd dispersed, and Hua told his brother monks that now it was time to divide the money and go their separate ways. Afterward, the monks whispered among themselves and said that this guy was the one. Then one of the monks said that his name was Hoi Zheng and his brother's name was Hoi Ming. So they lost their temple and now have to wander the world. Zheng said that if Hua was from Shaolin, they would be grateful if he accepted them. Meanwhile, Hua smiled and thought that they had taken a bite. Hua then replied to them that although the Shaolin temple does not accept foreign monks, they could try. And he also said that he believes that if a monk is not greedy and can pass their test, he is eligible to join their temple. And then Zheng realized that he was not just a monk, but an abbot. The monks immediately bowed before him and apologized for treating him so disrespectfully. Hua replied that there was nothing wrong with that. Meanwhile, Zheng was thinking how a person dressed as a beggar could be an abbot. Hua then suggested that they split the money. Zheng said that they had not participated in the earnings in any way, so he should take it all for himself. Hua replied that he couldn't do that. Zheng said that they think Mr. Abbott is very talented and will be able to promote his dharma in the future, and they both want to join his temple. Hua realized that if he wanted Shaolin to prosper, in addition to rebuilding, he needed to recruit disciples to make the temple more popular. So he told the monks that he knew at first sight that they were worthy to join his temple. However, Hua realized that they shouldn't think that joining the temple would be very easy, otherwise they wouldn't see him as a true abbot. So he told them that seeing how they both wanted to enter the temple, he suggested that they join the Shaolin sect first, and for the time being, they would be respective brothers. And he will watch them in their behavior and then tell them whether or not they will join their temple. Hua created imaginary sects that would pressure them to work hard for the imaginary sect. Thereupon the monks bowed and said that they agreed, and also that the abbot was merciful and the poor monks would not fail him for anything. After a while at Mt. Shaoshi, Hua was climbing up, and the monks followed him. Ming asked Zheng if they had joined the Shaolin temple too hastily. Zheng replied that it was the right thing to do, since he has a hunch that if they follow him, they will always have enough food. Finally, they got there, and Hua said, "Here comes that Shaolin temple." Then Hua went to his brothers Kong and Yiqin and said that they could meet their brothers. Kong and Yiqin were surprised. Hua introduced his brothers and said that they were the new Shaolin disciples Hoi Zheng and Hoi Ming. Yiqin was happy that he now had a younger brother. Kong was wary. He didn't know if these disciples would be obedient. Hua then said that Zhang and Ming would sleep in the room together with Yiqin. Now we should rest since there is a lot to do tomorrow. Before going to sleep, Hua pondered that the Shaolin building was too crowded, and he was afraid that this small temple would not be able to accommodate many people. So he decided to expand this building as soon as possible, but he needs money to do so. After a while, Hua was excavating. At that time, Kong came to him and said that the blue brick for paving the floor had run out. Then Ichin came in and said that the owner of the brick house had come to ask about money. Just then, Zhang and Min came over and reported that there was no more food in the temple and all their money had run out. Every time he went to bed, he saw his brothers in front of him, who were always demanding something from him. Such nightmares would make He jump up at night. He would see a silhouette in front of him and say he had no money. The next day, Itsun informed him that there were many people outside who wanted to see him. He went outside and saw a crowd of people in front of him. They said they had come to hear his stories. Some even came from another city. A woman said her child couldn't sleep last night until she heard the story continue. The little girl asked him to write a book. He bowed to them and said that he had not seen them for only a couple of days and they had not changed in any way. He also said that he had planned to worship and incense the Buddha today. But he could tell them the story of the journey to the west, but not for long. Someone in the crowd said that there were also 4 other monks here, and he could ask them to do things for him. Zhang immediately started pushing the brothers inside and told the men that the 4 of them should go to the foot of the mountain to do some work. He told people that right now there was only one monk in the temple, and the incense often needed to be changed, so he wouldn't be able to tell stories for long. People started shouting that they were so early, and what should they do now? They asked him to think of something. Then He turned around and said that they were lucky as he had an idea. He said that each of them could buy some incense and put it up so that the Buddha would not only see them but also bless them. He realized that this was a great way to make money. One of the men immediately said that he would buy 2 sticks of incense, but only to start the ceremony faster. He then said that all they needed to do was just throw 3 coins and light the stick on fire. A man came up to do all this and asked, "Why does incense smell like oil?" Then He said that there is oil in the incense so that there is more energy from the flame. The more incense that burns, the more devotees will receive the Buddha's blessings. After that, everyone began to approach the incense. He told everyone that they should not let the incense go out because it was disrespectful to the Buddha. And if it stops burning, the poor monk will be forced to interrupt storytelling for the day. Also, He recalled that the last time he had talked about the great sage Chi Tian. At this time, He thought about the fact that 1 stick of incense and oil costs 3 minutes, and he bought them in bulk, 1 copper coin for each stick, so he earns 2 coins every 3 minutes. He realized that he could earn 40 coins in an hour, and if he narrated for 5 hours, he could get 2 silver coins. He began to tell a story. He said that the Monkey King said his middle name was the sun. The traveler scolded him and said he was a vile animal. Soon He said that it was getting dark, so that was it for today. And if anyone wants to hear the continuation, they can come back tomorrow. Everyone dispersed, and suddenly He noticed that one of the listeners was still not leaving. The man introduced himself and said that his name was Qian, and that he had heard the abbot's name and had come here to meet him. He replied that he does not have face-to-face meetings, and if he has something to say, he can speak sooner rather than later, since He is going out to dinner and is afraid he will run out of time. He thought that this person was very smart and resourceful. He was probably an important person. Qian at the same time thought that this monk was too straightforward. Qian said that he wants to discuss business together, and when He tells stories, he will find someone to record it. And when the book came to an end, he would buy the story from He to teach people in other cities in the future. Qian realized that this book would have great potential, and it would definitely make a lot of money. As for this monk, he is someone who hasn't seen the world, so he is easily deceived. He wondered if it was a coincidence. He knew he had to think of a way to get his head around it. So He replied that he wasn't quite sure, but he was still in. He asked how much money he would get out of it. Qian smiled and replied, 20. He understood that 20 silver coins for buying a good book was few and far between. He laughed and replied that he agreed, as 200,000 coins was like a breath of fresh air. Hearing such an amount, Qian almost went crazy. He started shouting that he was only willing to give 22 coins. He then replied to him that it looked like the reader was not doing business for the good of the faith, so he could leave. He turned around, but Qian stopped him and said that they could negotiate a price of 30 coins, or even 100 coins. He proudly replied that he communicates with the reader as a friend, but he communicates with him as a fool. After saying that, He was even proud of himself and thought. Qian fell at his feet and began to ask Mr. Abbott, "What kind of business is this where they set the prices they want?" He asked to discuss it again. After a while, He still let him inside. At this time, Qian was thinking that he was definitely a speculator who could suck up all his money. After all, he insisted on a full story breakdown and is asking for 50 coins per episode, which means that a story of 100 episodes would cost 5,000 silver pieces. The only thing that comforted Chien was that he allowed him to pay in installments. First for the first 30 episodes, then for the next 30, and so on. In this groove, Chien brought him the written episodes. He couldn't understand what kind of strange monk he was. He then asked Chien if he would like to visit the Shaolin Temple Yuhang Mountain with him. Chien started to get worried and thought that there was another pit ahead of him. So he replied that he had some other things to do, so he would go. He said he wanted to see the devotee off and also wanted to give him a tour of the Shaolin Temple. Chien agreed, and now on the road, He asked him what he thought about the future of the Shaolin Temple. Chien replied that the Yuhang Mountain region, where the Shaolin Temple is located, is very large. It is easy to defend and hard to attack, and it is also famous for figures like Zhang Fang. Chien also said that he could guess that the future of the temple is quite extraordinary. He replied that he was surprised that the devotee knew about the philosophy of the Shaolin Temple. Chien said that Shaolin preaches compassion and the salvation of all beings. And it is welcome among the people, but it is not so popular at the moment. And if the temple can get a name in the world, it will definitely attract more attention. He thanked him for his opinion, and said that their opinions were the same, for he too believed that Shaolin would definitely prosper, but at the moment there were still difficulties. For example, foundations, silver coins, and so on. Listening to this, Chien thought that this was definitely some kind of scam. He then asked him to look into the distance, and told him that he wanted to erect a mountain gate here, and a wall, to line the ground with bricks, and restore the road up the mountain for everyone, but that would take a lot of silver coins, and he's a poor penniless monk. Listening to this, Chien thought that it was a good thing he was staying as a monk, otherwise he wouldn't have a place in Lu City. He continued his story and said that this was why the poor monk wanted to make another deal with the devotee, citing the future of Shaolin. He asked to lend him some coins. Chien asked, "What is this guarantee of future income?" He then said that although he was optimistic about the future of the Shaolin, what He said was just dreams. He said he should be bold and treat it as an investment. And if he wants to make a lot of money, it's worth taking the risk. And He also said that if the Shaolin did not bring in money, he would tell him an interesting story for free to recoup his losses. He began to tell the story. At the end of the day, the 7 kingdoms broke up and united to form Qin, and after Qin was destroyed, Chu and Han broke up and formed Han. The Han dynasty revolted as the impersonator decapitated the White Snake and ruled the world. Later, Guana was handed over to the emperor and the dynasty split into 3 kingdoms. He then interrupted and asked Qin what he thought of the story. Qin was impressed and said that this story should be sold to him. He then recalled that he had mentioned the investment earlier. Qin replied that he was definitely investing money in the business. He smiled widely and said that it was the right decision. In his head, he had already calculated the Shaolin Temple's property plus 5,000 coins. Now He realized that there was indeed enough money and it was time to build. He decided that this was a big project that should be finished in 3 to 5 months, and he hoped that Qin would be able to bring many workers and materials by tomorrow. Suddenly, the system alerted that in honor of the Dragon Boat Festival, he was getting +1 lucky ticket. He was very surprised that the system also has promotions every New Year's holiday. He started spinning the wheel and asked for the grand prize to fall out. The system alerted that he had won 3 lucky opportunity tickets. He rejoiced that he had obtained a super rare item for the 2nd time, and luck was indeed on his side. He began to consider himself an emperor. The system alerted that the Lotus Sutra, the wooden fish gong, and the order of construction of the Lagoda of the 10,000 Buddhas had been received. He began to examine the fish gong and said that it was no different from an ordinary wooden fish gong, and it was a complete failure. He then knocked on this gong, and an aura of incredible beauty formed around it. The guy opened his eyes and found himself on the sea, sandy beach all around, beautiful girls, warmth. It was incredibly comfortable. He realized that this treasure calmed people's minds and allowed them to forget their problems. He decided that when the time came, he would knock that fish gong next to someone who was upset, dissatisfied with life, and maybe that way they could sort themselves out and convert to Buddhism. And then his temple will rise from its knees. After that, He took the Lotus Sutra in his hands. He opened the book, and from there the image of the flower began to glow. After studying the book for a bit, He said that it was a huge amount of knowledge, which was quite attractive. Hua also said that the order to build 10,000 Buddha pagodas is also a good thing. It can play a decisive role. Hua remembered that ancient times were especially fond of theories about miracles and false wonders. For example, like colored happy clouds, the appearance of cruel samurai, and golden light. Hua realized that if he came up with something real and hired someone to retell the story, he would attract even more believers. After that, Hua thought that he could donate to the Buddha statues for security, and thus he would not have to worry about buying incense in the future. Although Hua regretted that he didn't gain any new martial arts techniques, but all three of these things were useful for the temple. The next day came, and Hua went outside to practice the Iron Head technique. Suddenly Qian appeared with a crowd of people. Then he went up to the master and said that he had brought people and they had taken money with them. Seeing this, Hua couldn't help but be overjoyed. He immediately rushed to hug his admirer. After that, Qian handed him a pouch. Hua asked if this was the money they had agreed on yesterday. Qian replied that there were 1,000 silver bars and 5,900 silver bills. Hua rejoiced and said that this was the first amount of money to build a Shaolin temple. After a while, Hua gave orders for the workers to begin construction. He indicated from where they should build the wall around Mount Yuhang, then showed which part will be completely covered with brick, and the road uphill will be restored, and handrails will be installed along it on both sides. Qian stepped closer to him and said that he hoped it would work. Hua asked what is wrong, because infrastructure is a top priority and it is better to thoroughly do things now than to remodel in the future. Qian said that what he meant was that to repair all of this, it would take about 30,000 silver, and where would Hua get that money from? At this moment, Qian was worried about his money, and then Hua replied to him that it was too windy and suggested that he go inside for a cup of tea. Qian asked not to worry about it and said that his bank could be called the largest branch and the maximum amount could not exceed 10,000 taels. Then Hua took a deep breath and said that it turns out his authority is not enough. He asked Qian that if he was running a branch, could he tell him where the main office was? Qian replied that the main office was in Jingling and his branch was in the city's district, but to be honest, his bank wasn't even a branch. Qian said that the maximum amount Hua can borrow from the branch is 50,000, but he thinks Mr. Abbott's temple will be built for 30,000 or 40,000. Hua then asked that if Qian wanted to borrow money from the branch, could he recommend a couple to him? Qian replied that it's not a problem, that Hua wants to borrow money there, but he's afraid it won't be easy, since the branch master in the county is a man named Zhao. He is a talented man with a great background. He failed the exam many times and has now become a merchant in a bank. He has a contradictory personality and can easily talk to people, but only if he is interested in them. That's why Qian said Hua can't take a loan without collateral. Hua then asked, what kind of person could Master Zhao like? Qian replied that he likes talented people. And there was one man who wrote a quatrain of 7 characters. Then the owner gave him a standing ovation and gave him 50,000 on the spot. Hua thought it shouldn't be difficult. He told Qian to tell Zhao that the poor monk wanted to meet him tomorrow. Qian wondered what talents the monk might have. He thought that after learning about the difficulty, Hua would retreat, but it didn't occur to him that he would want a meeting. In the end, Qian said that he would be at the foot of the mountain tomorrow, so they could go to the branch together. The next day came. Qian warned him that the owner had a peculiar personality, and if there was anything wrong with the hospitality, he apologized. Hua replied that there was no need to worry about that. They went inside, and the guy at the entrance asked Qian where he was from. Qian replied that he wanted to see the owner of Zhao. The guy said that he would call out now, and suddenly, he stopped and asked that if it was the narrator monk. Hua bowed and replied that it was indeed him, the poor monk. At this moment, Hua thought that he didn't expect to meet a little fan. The guy ran up to him and started saying that he had come to the Shaolin temple 2 days ago to listen to his stories. He assured me that his stories were very interesting. Qian stepped in and reminded the guy that they needed to see their master soon, and he should let him know about them. The boy ran and asked the abbot not to leave, since he wants to know what happened to the king of the monkeys after his imprisonment. Hua smiled widely and thought that he was quite a talkative and nice guy. After a while, the guy came back and reported that the owner Zhao said he couldn't accept them now and asked them to wait here. Hua noticed that the guy's emotions were very different from when he left. He thought that the master had deliberately asked him to wait to humiliate him. But what had made him angry? Then Hua asked the guy what his name was, and said that while he was waiting for Master Zhao, he could tell him the continuation of the story. The guy started jumping with happiness and said his name was Huang. He offered Hua tea and sweets to have a good time. During tea time, Hua wondered if the Shaolin Temple might actually consider recruiting worldly disciples with powerful martial arts like Huang. Huang asked him why he said the Tathagata Buddha was not so bad. Even if Suk Wukong caused a riot in the Heavenly Palace, he shouldn't have been imprisoned under a mountain for 500 years. Huang said that when he thinks about it, he gets scared. After all, if it were him, he wouldn't be able to bear it after 5 days or even hours. Suddenly, Qian put his hand on his shoulder and told him not to talk nonsense, as Tathagata Buddha is the head of thousands of Buddhas, and the person in front of him is the abbot of the temple, so you should not speak ill of the Buddha. Hua bowed and replied that it didn't matter as the Buddha was merciful and he wasn't going to blame him. Hua asked Huang if he had ever seen a statue of the Buddha. Huang replied that he often sees the Buddha statue, and that he has a round head, a big belly, and is always smiling. Also, Huang said that he is better than Boss Qian. Hua laughed and replied that the Buddha also knew that he was very fat, and so he wanted to lose weight. Hearing this, Qian almost choked on his tea. Huang was surprised and asked if the Buddha had lost weight. Hua said that the Buddha wanted to lose weight, so he ate vegetarian food every day. He even came up with a special exercise for weight loss. He did it every day but still no weight loss. And in the end, he even resorted to cruel methods such as cutting up meat and feeding it to the eagle, but his weight still stood still. Buddha had used so many methods, all to no avail, and when he learned that Suk Wukong was eating all day and looking better than him, he became envious. And in a fit of rage, he drove Suk Wukong under the mountain of the 5 elements for 500 years and promised himself that he would lose weight. Qian watched from the side and thought that this abbot really wasn't simple. He didn't adhere to worldly concepts at all. After all, how could an observer joke about Buddha? Soon it was evening, and finally Huang announced that Master Zhao had invited guests to a banquet and was asking them to join them. Qian thought that Zhao letting them spend the whole day here and inviting other guests at night was definitely not a show of friendliness. Qian was going to talk Hua out of it, but Hua told him that if they were invited, then they were appropriate, and asked Huang to see them off. The guy asked to follow him. Soon they arrived, and Huang informed Master Zhao that Shaolin abbot and salesman Qian had arrived. Zhao said that he was happy to meet him, and since everyone was gathered, he would introduce the rest of the guests. Zhao said it was the pride of their county, the fairy of iron tenacity and romantic hero, Qin Dingqing. Zhao also said that Qin is a celebrity in their neighborhood. Not only does he have an elegant literary style, but he is also excellent in martial arts. He's awesome at punching holes with a folding fan, and he once killed 4 great villains outside of town to keep the neighborhood safe. At this moment, Qin thought about the fact that there weren't any 4 villains, just little gangsters. Hua meanwhile bowed and apologized for the disrespect, since he was a hero. Zhao then introduced the warden of Fuwang Temple, Master Li Xian. He is the younger brother of Master Linkong, the temple keeper, practicing Buddhism and martial arts. Then Zhao introduced Qian and said that he was the treasurer of the bank in the city of Lua. Then he pointed to Hua and said that he was a monk from the temple. Hua bowed and realized that Zhao was clearly hostile towards him, although he had never met him before, so he doesn't know why he's acting like this. Li bowed to him in return and said that the Shaolin Temple is also on Shaoshi Mountain. It is located on the highest point. The place is good, but the sect has long been established, and there is no reputation. Li also said that the Shaolin population had also disappeared, and with it their skills. And now there are probably only a few disciples left, and he doesn't even know how good they are. And also judging by Abbot's age, Li said he should only practice martial arts, and is most likely not strong in Taoism. Hua replied that he didn't agree with what Master Li said. Although there are not many disciples in his sect, but everyone is connected by their hearts. And recently some monks have joined them. And as for the theory of martial arts and Buddhism, Master Li's words are even more wrong. There is no limit to learning, and one who achieves this understanding is very good. Hua said he believes his sect is as good as any other sect in Buddhism, and sooner or later Shaolin martial arts will be known all over the world. Master Li got angry and started shouting that his demands were too high, and how dare he say that Shaolin martial arts would be known all over the world. Hua told him that in less than 3 years, Shaolin would be known to everyone, and Master Li should just wait and see it. Master Li further lost his temper and said that since Abbot was so confident, he wanted to exchange a few moves with him, and asked, would he dare to fight him? Hua answered him no, since this is Zhao Seller's house and he is a scholar, and he doesn't like fighting battles. And as guests, they must abide by his rules. And after they come out, they can fight. Li realized that he had come here today to borrow money, and so he tried not to cause trouble, but he wasn't going to just let the abbot go. So Li said the discussion would be postponed for a while. But Abbott just said that in his school, Buddhism and martial arts are not inferior to other schools. And since Seller Zhao is a scholar, maybe he can compare Kung Fu from books. Hui gave it some serious thought. Master Li started laughing and asked that if he was afraid. And anyway, if he apologized, they would forget about this situation. Qian tried to say something to the abbot, but Hui replied that it would be better, but if they were talking about Buddhism, it was likely that Seller Zhao wouldn't be much interested in it. After that, Hui smiled and asked, "What about poetry?" Zhao was surprised at this. After that, Zhao clapped his hands and said that it was a good suggestion, and it was wonderful for him to hear their beautiful poetry. Master Li said that poetry is certainly good for entertainment, but one should not forget the prize, as it must be worthy, otherwise the poems will not be very enjoyable. Zhao asked what kind of prize he wanted. Li said that the prize should be something they really want. Li clarified that if the poem he would write was approved by Zhao, he would like to receive the 30,000 taels he had previously mentioned. Zhao replied that if the verse was suitable, giving him that money wouldn't be a problem. Unexpectedly, Chen said that he was from the street, so he had heard many verses, and why shouldn't he become a judge? Hui thought about the fact that it was likely that the three people had already discussed the loan issue and were now just pretending. Zhao asked the abbot what he thought about it. Hui replied that if the poor monk's tea sounded good to his ears, he would have to ask to borrow 50,000 taels. Hearing this, Li grimaced. Zhao replied that in that case, it would depend on whether the monk had the talent for it. Zhao then asked what awaits those who lose. Chen said that whoever loses will be fined a bottle of wine. Zhao replied that it wouldn't work that way, because if Master Li and the abbot had to drink a bottle of wine, it would be a violation of their commandments. Chen asked what Li thought about it. Li replied that if he lost, he would punish himself with a bottle of wine, just like the hero Chen said. Then everyone looked at the abbot and asked what he thought. Chen meanwhile thought that even if the master was better than the abbot, but he was still their guest, and they were humiliating him like this. Hui realized that if Li wanted him to break his commandments, the only one who would do it was him. But he realized that even if he lost, he was not afraid of such punishment. And then Hui replied that since Master Li was so brave, the poor monk could not keep up with him. He said that wine and meat pass through his stomach, but the Buddha is in his heart, and in case he loses, the Buddha will understand the poor abbot. Zhao at this moment thought that this monk had now raised himself so much that even if he drank alcohol and ate meat, it would only give him a good reputation. And for the sake of the temple's development, he is willing to endure humiliation. Zhao drank some water and said that now that they had decided on the punishment, they could officially begin. He turned the glass over and tapped it. Beautiful girls gathered around the corner and began to discuss that there was a very handsome monk there. Li approached the abbot and suggested that he write poems related to Buddhism since they were both monks. Hui replied that it should be so. Li turned away and smiled, thinking that he had prepared some Buddhist verses beforehand, and the abbot was no match for him. Master Li went first. He recited the verses with the following titles. Partially entered the vegetarian Buddhist house, regardless of what happens in the sky, and a couple others. Chen applauded and said that it was wonderful as expected from Master Li. So sensual, picturesque, and exciting. Chen then said that the abbot could come out. Zhao thought that Li's poem was good, but there have been better ones. He wondered what the young abbot could do. Hui replied that he needed to look up a couple of variations in his poetry library. Suddenly he realized that he had found the very thing. Hui said that the moonlight today is extremely beautiful. Qian replied that apricot blossoms and the bright moon, wine tasting and poetry is one of the best pleasures. Master Li took a deep breath and told Abbot not to delay and hurriedly read his poems. Hui replied to him that a monk develops the mind, and impatience goes against the teachings of Buddhism and affects the state of mind. Li replied that poor monks don't stick to that, and he assumes that the abbess is just trying to jump off the subject. And suddenly the abbot began to read. He spoke the first words. Zen is like the moon, without dust. Everyone looked at him in amazement. Next, Hui read a work of incredible beauty, each word seeming to pass through his soul. Zhao listened attentively, and suddenly felt an incredible sense of satisfaction. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was by the river. He saw the abbot next to him and asked what was going on. Hui struck the fish gong again, and after that blow, they found themselves on a huge whale that soared through the air like a bird. Zhao couldn't get enough of it. He said that the feeling of spring wind was really amazing. Was struck again, and Zhao came to his senses. He opened his eyes and said the lines about free spring were incredible. He then told the abbot that his great aspirations and ambitions had been a lesson to him, and if the abbot could understand this world, he would make a name for himself without putting in the effort. He replied that he was honored and fortunate, and at present he wants to build a place for Shaolin monks to live and study. And so he came to ask for his help. Zhao bowed to him in return and said that he admired the righteousness of the abbot. Meanwhile, Master Li got angry and shouted that Zhao still hadn't said whose style was better. Xin took a sip of tea and replied to him that he couldn't even compare to the abbot. Xin told Master Li that it was impossible to realize the comparison between the stubborn stone and the golden jade. Master Li got even more angry. He went up to Zhao and said that he didn't believe what Xin said. And since Zhao is a scholar, let him speak. Zhao then said that the abbot told a great verse, and it was the first time he had heard it, so he shouldn't even try to compare it. Meanwhile, Hu took a cup of tea and sat down. Seeing this, Master Li couldn't be reassured that he was about to get the money so easily. Li then looked angrily at Zhao and said that since he was unwilling to lend to him, then he would ask others. Lastly, Li said that the abbot could build his Shaolin temple and spend as much money as he needed to do so, and in case he did not succeed, he could not return the money. Or replied to him that he didn't have to worry about it since he would do everything right. And even if he didn't succeed, it would only be his problem. Zhao eventually signed a promissory note with Hua and lent 50,000 taels of silver to build the temple, to be repaid when the Shaolin made a profit. The infrastructure construction of the Shaolin temple has finally officially begun, and even the lazy Kong has joined in. Everyone in the temple has united. The day of rising is imminent. It should also be noted that the temple already had its first disciple, Huang Feihong. Hua watched all this and rejoiced at his first victories. Hua continued to tell interesting stories to the people. He said that the red demon pointed his spear at the Monkey King and tried to kill him. And the Monkey King also quickly took out his golden club to swing away. Suddenly someone interrupted his story with a loud shout. Unknown people burst into the temple, and one of them shouted for everyone to disperse in different directions since Lord Nyu was here. A servant prepared a chair for his lord, and the huge, muscular man sat down on that chair. The man also stuck his sword into the ground. When Hua saw this, he thought that these were his precious bricks, and that he had saved up for all this for so long. The man then told Hua to listen to him carefully and remember that everyone in the neighborhood who does business and makes money from it must pay him. And also, Nu said that Hua had told stories here before, so he had already earned about 100 silver. And since he's a monk, Nyu won't force him, it would be better to pay voluntarily. And Nu also added that Hua would have to pay extra since he personally came here. Apprentice Wan told the abbot that this is the so-called Master Nu, a simple martial arts instructor. And this guy is nothing, and the people around him are his students. Hua asked Huang how many of these people he had been in contact with. Huang replied that he had not spoken to many. But other than Nyo, he has no opponents here, and right now there are many, so Wan said he could handle 3, well at most 5. Suddenly the servant shouted to the abbot that he was actually talking to him, and he had better just take the money out, and then their master would forgive past mistakes. Hua took a deep breath and replied that the point was that wine, sex, and riches were sins, so he advised them to do good instead of evil. And what they sow is what they reap, and what they do today will probably cause them suffering in their future reincarnations. Hua then came closer and said that they could actually quickly put away the sword, repent to the Buddha, and leave immediately so as not to face retribution. Hua was well aware that he wouldn't be able to pay the protection fee. After all, he was now investing in the future lands of the temple. And then Nyu got angry and started yelling that he bald idiot would pay him money without any objection. Hua looked at him menacingly and asked what would happen if he didn't pay. Kong also intervened and said that they were monks and there should be some compassion for them. Disciple Huang started shouting to Kong that such a person was always looking for the easiest way to make money, and if Kong gave up now, he would ask for more in the future. Nu asked again if they refused to pay. He heard nothing in reply, so he immediately got up from his seat and swung his sword and said that he would destroy their temple. Hua asked how dare he threaten the abbot, and just because they're monks doesn't mean they won't fight. He then told his brothers that it was necessary to deal with these insolents, and one began to attack. Kong and I Ching also attacked the brigands. Kong poked one of them in the eye with his fingers. And at this time, Nu decided to attack the abbot, who at that moment thought why the strongest one was coming at him. Hua noticed that Nyu wanted to cut off his head. He thought he would let Nu come closer, and Hua would show him what that bald head could do. Meanwhile, NYU was very angry and yelled that he couldn't take it anymore and would kill that bald donkey. Nu swung his sword, and at that moment Hua put his head under the sword. The brother monks and the disciple began to shout to their abbot. But as soon as Nu struck, his sword bounced and flew out of his hands. NYU couldn't believe that this was possible. After that, Hua took a deep breath and calmly told NYU to put down the knife and face the Buddha right now, otherwise he would have to act. Nu looked at Hua in horror and started shouting that he was a monster. Then he ran away from the temple in fear. His men, meanwhile, stood bewildered, and Hua asked them menacingly if they would help them get out of here. They started running away and said they would leave on their own and not bother them anymore. People around started saying that Master Abbot was very strong and it was unrealistically cool. Everyone was excited and said that Shaolin Temple was really amazing. However, Huang told Abbot that he had to be careful because Nu still had Shinjing's support, and he is not someone who should be messed with. Hua replied that it didn't matter who supported him anyway, since the Abbot also had support, and it was from the Buddha. Meanwhile, Hua thought about the fact that today was the 25th day, and it had been a month since he had been here. That meant that at 12 o'clock he would be able to play the lottery. And this lottery will determine if he can handle the future problems associated with Nu. Night came, all the monks went to bed. And the system asked Hua if he would like to use the lottery ticket right now. Hua said yes. He realized that luck was very important this time, as the temple had become popular and more enemies would appear. And if Hua can't acquire high-quality martial arts techniques, he can safely start preparing for the worst. Hua knew that after more than 20 days of cultivation, his ability to take qi into his body had become much stronger. And if he could combine that with technique, what happened today would no longer happen. So far, luck was on his side, but this time it would be all about the Shaolin Temple, and Hua didn't know if his luck would continue. Suddenly, the system congratulated Hua for obtaining the Lion Roar technique. It is an iconic Shaolin martial art he can destroy with his sonic attacks. Hua rejoiced, and suddenly he realized that it was midnight. And if he used this technique in the temple, it would definitely cause a commotion, so he decided to go to the back mountain. Lion's Roar is one of the 72 Shaolin tricks. After using it, the tongue explodes with thunder and the sound waves can travel dozens of miles. People nearby will be terrified when they hear it. If they don't have the inner strength to defend themselves, they will be killed by the huge sound waves. In severe cases, people bleed out and die, their arms and legs broken by the vibrations. Meanwhile, Hua came to the mountain and decided to test the technique. He took in a full chest of air and shouted loudly as he exhaled. There was an incredibly powerful sound that cut through the tree trunks and broke them. Hua said that this roar was simply terrifying. Then Hua suddenly felt very bad. He didn't understand what was happening. Hua plopped down on the ground and thought that although he had obtained the full essence of a lion's roar, it didn't mean that he could produce the strongest lion's roar. And he also thought that the reason might be that his inner strength was too weak. And if he didn't learn it, he would be in trouble. Suddenly, Hua heard someone asking in a terrifying voice, "Who's there?" Hua became alarmed. And suddenly someone unknown grabbed him by the throat and asked him who was this child who dared to disturb the old man. At this moment, Hua didn't realize who this master at the back of the Shaolin Temple mountain was. Hua then gathered all his strength and used the lion roar technique. There was a very loud sound. After that, the creature retreated. And Hua reflected that if he had wanted to kill it, he would have done it long ago, but he let it go, and it was most likely a warning. And it's possible that this mystery man can't leave the place for whatever reason, so he can only intimidate. Either way, Hua realized that it was dangerous, so he decided that he had to find a way to get him out of here. Hua came to the temple and thought that according to the plan, the temple could be divided into 4 parts. In the first and second areas would be the Bell Tower, the Hall of Heaven, Guanyin Hall, Vajara Hall, Mita Hall, Weitua Hall, Manjushri Hall, Medicine Master Hall, the 10 Reincarnation Halls, the main hall and other Buddhist halls. And the rest of the rooms will be mainly for pilgrims and tourists. The third area will be the Inner Shaolin Temple, which includes the Zai Hall, dormitories, Arhat Hall, Bodhi Hall, Prajna Hall, Dharma Hall and Martial Arts Field. And regarding the fourth part, Hua decided that he needed to rely on the manifestation of the Buddha. The system asked if Hua was sure he wanted to use the 10,000 steps construction token. Hua confirmed. The token shattered into thousands of different shards. Each shard literally created a miracle, creating structures of incredible beauty. Hua looked at it and said, "This is the truest miracle. This is the treatment given to the Son of Heaven." Hua thought it was a shame that he had just feared the mysterious man on the mountain. After all, how could he compare to him? Then he went inside. There are 1,500 big and small Buddha statues on the first floor alone. The second floor is similar to the first floor, except that the center Buddha statue has become a bodhisattva. There are over 10,000 Buddha statues on all the other 8 floors. Hua said that these are the real 10,000 steps. Soon Hua climbed to the top floor and thought that the tower had been erected on the ground overnight. And such a miracle would surely increase the number of believers in the Shaolin Temple. With a good solid base, it would be much easier to recruit students in the future. Hua realized that he was one step closer to completing the task, and thus to freedom. Suddenly, Hua heard I Ching shouting to his brothers that it was time to wake up. And at the same moment, a crowd of people broke into the temple to listen to the stories. As soon as they entered, people began to shout that this was a real miracle, and that Buddha himself had appeared. They began to bow and asked that the Buddha bless them and their children. Some asked for help in finding a good man, some asked for a child. Hua watched this and smiled. Then he wished them all good morning from the top floor of the tower. People told him that it was a real miracle. Suddenly, Hua took a step forward and began to fall downward. People were startled and were even more shocked. Meanwhile, Hua landed on his head. I Ching ran up to him and asked what was going on here. Hua stood up and said that the Buddha had recently visited his dream. And Buddha said that he was touched by the sincerity of the Shaolin Temple and for that he would create a miracle, and these 10,000 steps are the proof of that. People could not contain their excitement. They asked to be allowed to visit the Buddha's miracle. Everyone was curious to see what was inside. Hua asked them to calm down and said that Buddha had given him an order. This tower can only bless 10,000 families. Therefore, if they really believe in Buddha, they can visit the tower. The rest of us can only watch from the outside and burn incense near the tower. Hua realized that if so many people came in, the tower might collapse. Besides, he needs to rely on this tower to make money, and he can't let them in for free. People were surprised that this was the Buddha's wish. Then one of the girls asked the abbot how to please the Buddha. Soon people began to buy Buddha statues from the tower. For 5 taels of silver, was sold a small statue. He was selling a medium-sized statue for 12 taels of silver. And Hua also said that if someone paid 100 taels of silver, he would have access to all the rooms. After a while, a huge queue formed outside the temple. Everyone wanted to go inside and see the miracle with their own eyes. Shangguan Xiong was also standing in line with a servant. The servant told him that he had checked everything, and yesterday, after the abbot had scattered all the rascals, he had told everyone that the Buddha would soon appear. And after that, this tower appeared. Shun said that this little temple really should be grateful to the Buddha. Shun asked if he had checked this abbot. The servant told me that the name was Abbot Jie, and he had been in the Shaolin Temple since he was a child. And when their master died, the power passed to him, and he also has an older brother and a younger brother. Xiong asked what about martial arts. The servant replied that Shaolin Temple is not famous in the martial arts world, so not much is known about it. Then Xiong asked that didn't he say that NYU was ready to attack at any time, and told the servant to go and stir up a conflict between them so that NYU would test all his capabilities. The servant set off, and Shun stopped him. He told him to remember that he must have someone secretly guard this abbot if he could really communicate with the Buddha. Meanwhile, a fellow from the crowd approached the abbot and said that here were his 5 taels of silver to ask the Buddha to bless his family. Hua replied that if he was sincere, the Buddha would hear him. Suddenly, Hua discovered NYU in the crowd. Hua thought that this guy was in the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to take revenge on him. He realized that he could knock these rascals out with his lion's roar, but since there were so many residents here, he would have to find another way to get rid of them. Hua knew that there was always a way out. Hua then told the residents that the Shaolin Temple was blessed by Buddha and would continue to show miracles in the future. And he also said that there are people who want to destroy the temple and make Buddha hate the place, who have come and are coming to the temple repeatedly to do harm. And by acting this way, they are not only enemies of the Shaolin, but enemies of everyone. Hua asked the villagers to think about it and asked if they could tolerate such behavior. The residents revolted and began to shout that they would defend the pagoda, defend the temple. Then Hua pointed his finger and said that it was them, the second bull gang from Dingfeng County. Although Buddha is merciful, they should teach them a lesson. Nu didn't know how to react and got angry. Meanwhile, people from the crowd started attacking them. With the whole crowd, They slaughtered these brigands who were begging for mercy. Hua watched from the sidelines and said that it seems like the mass path is the right decision, and not only can you hide your power that way, but it's good for the future recruitment of disciples. Suddenly, Hua noticed suspicious people behind his back. It was Xiong and his servant. Soon, Xiong approached the abbot and said that he wanted to meet the Shaolin abbot. Hua felt his aura and realized that this man was not so simple. There is a clear division of power over Jianghu, usually divided into Hotian masters and innate masters. And Hotian is further divided into early stage, middle stage, and late stage, and then the great consummation. The early stage refers to cultivating the discipline of internal energy and feeling qi, which is considered to have entered the Hotian realm. The middle stage refers to the cultivation of internal energy with a certain level of attainment. That is, reaching a point where internal energy can pass through the meridians and travel throughout the body. At this time, attacks using any part of the body supported by internal energy can do a lot of damage. In later stages, internal energy can radiate outside the body so that people can clearly feel it. Hotian perfection means that the attainment of inner energy has reached the realm of small success, at which time the energy can be reset, achieving a return to the basics. Meanwhile, one noticed that this man's gaze was like a torch, and he was most likely a late master Hotian. But Hua didn't realize whether he was an enemy or a friend. Xiang suggested to talk indoors. Hua wondered that as soon as he arrived, he invited him to talk indoors. Is he a Buddhist, or does he want to become a monk? Soon Xiang said that he had arrived uninvited to speak to the abbot. Hua replied that he was sorry to have to welcome him here. Xiang said that he was a simple commoner with a small fortune, so he was not worthy of the title of guest of honor. Hua told him that if he came to the Shaolin to find an abbot but has to hide his identity, then he is not liberal enough. At this moment, Hua thought about how he didn't trust him. Then Shun asked what the abbot saw. And Hua replied to him that unless he was wrong, Xiong was most likely from the army. Hearing this, Xiong became angry and could not contain his anger. His aura shone incredibly powerfully. Suddenly, his servant rushed in and asked what that murderous aura was and what was going on here. Shun stopped him. Xiong said that if he wasn't sure that he had never seen the abbot before, he would have doubted his identity. Xiong then sat down and said that since the abbot could see who he was, he would not hide that he was indeed from the army. Afterward, he said that this time he had really come to the abbot for something, because the father of a friend of his had believed in Buddhism all his life and had sought to have something of the Buddha nature in his life. And for this reason, the old man traveled all over the world and spent a great deal of money, but was never able to get what he wanted for many years. And a few days ago, Xiong heard that a miracle had appeared in the Shaolin temple, and since he was here on business, he came to visit the abbot, in the hope that he could get something of Buddha nature to help his friend's father fulfill his wish. Hua replied that it was not difficult, but if he believed in Buddha, he should come to their temple in person to show his sincerity. At this moment, Hua thought that he really didn't want to deal with the government, especially the military. He is in favor of peace and order. He also realized that if he didn't agree to his request, Xiong wouldn't back down. And since Hua couldn't resist, he decided to make friends first. Xiong said that he had a request and that he hoped the abbot would let him see something of the Buddha's nature so that he could have an idea of what to expect and ask the old man to come back. Hua replied that that would be great. And he also said that Xiong was in a depressed state, so he should listen to the sound and calm his mind. Hua struck the fish gong, and Xiong found himself in a paradisiacal place with girls of incredible beauty all around him. Shun asked where is this located. He was absolutely delighted, and when he came to his senses he asked if it was the power of the Buddha's nature. Xiong then bowed and said that if one day he left his official duties, he would come to Shaolin and stay with the Buddha for a long time. Hua smiled and said that this string of beads had been personally enlightened by the monk, so he was giving it as a souvenir. Xiong gave his name and said that he thanked the abbot. Hua asked him to go back and ask the old man to come to Shaolin. Leaving, Xiong was surprised that he had called out his name, and this young abbot remained unperturbed. He really is an unusual person. Meanwhile, Hua tried to remember who Shangguan Xiong was, as he had heard this name somewhere before. Hua realized that if he wanted to gain the respect of the officials, he would still have to improve his own strength. Otherwise, if he met an unreasonable person, all his efforts would be in vain. Hua remembered that he had been here for over a month and had participated in 3 lotteries. The next drawing is still a month away, so he needs to practice his skills diligently during that time to avoid situations like this. After all, when Hui used the lion's roar, all of his internal energy was drained. Hui realized that Shaolin had gained popularity now, and more people would be coming soon. So he figured they could use such an opportunity to recruit disciples. Soon news broke that the Shaolin Temple was fortunate enough to receive the blessing of the Buddha, who sends a pagoda of merit and virtue to bless people. And the abbot of that temple listened to the Buddha's decree, followed the will of heaven, and saved all living beings, wanting to promote the temple and recruit disciples. And soon a whole crowd gathered at the temple gate, a great many wishing to become disciples, and even the elderly grandfather believed in himself. The rules for admission are as follows: males between the ages of 10 and 25 can have a family, must be in good health and of sound character. Those who show good results can become Shaolin disciples and learn martial arts. They will have to attend morning classes every 3 days. Some were surprised that Shaolin teaches martial arts, as they are not famous for it. Someone asked if they provided food, and someone said that if he entered the temple, he could feed each master himself. Someone claimed that Shaolin was a precious place blessed by Buddha. Men approached the reception desk one by one. However, it wasn't just men standing in line. Even a very young girl came in who was asked to go home to her mom. The second phase was to test the physical fitness and stamina of each of the chosen ones. And the third phase was a test of patience. In the end, more than 100 people signed up at first, and after 3 tests, 3 or 4 remained. But in fact, none. Hui was willing to use some tricks to test the will of young people. For example, throw a piece of trash on the ground, drop 2 coins, food, or whatever. Suddenly, all of a sudden, the doors of the temple opened with incredible force, and a beautiful white tiger broke in. Hui started yelling for the brothers to close the door now and prevent the beast from rushing in further. Hui held the door and thought about the fact that this tiger is too big. Although it has inner strength, but its actual fighting power is very small, even with the help of his brothers. But suddenly Hui noticed that the tiger had retreated. Hui could not understand why the beast had retreated. And right after that, a human hand entered the gap. Hui was startled out of his wits. So he decided not to hold the door and saw before him a huge man with the fur of a tiger hanging from his shoulder. Hui thought that if this tiger belonged to this giant, it was better to deal with him. Hui bowed and asked why he had come to the temple this evening. Then the giant turned to the lady and said that the doors of the temple were still open and they had come on time. Hui looked behind that giant's back and saw there an incredibly beautiful girl who had a bandage over her face. Suddenly another little girl with a tiger appeared and asked him to step back, for could he not see that the lady was coming? Hui stood with his brothers, and none of them could understand what was going on here. Suddenly the little girl asked the monks what was wrong with them. And don't they see that their lady is here to worship the Buddha? She asked them to get out of the way. Kong bowed and said that the temple would be closing soon, so if they were here to offer incense, they had better come tomorrow morning. The girl started yelling at him to shut up because he was annoying, and said it was a blessing that the mistress was here. Kong thought this girl was very eloquent. The girl got even angrier and said that if he kept babbling, he might get bitten by the fangs. Suddenly, the girl called the girl named Xiao Chui and said that her words were becoming more and more delusional. The girl then asked if there was an abbot among the 5 monks. Hui stepped forward and said that he was the abbot of the temple. Hui thought that this girl's voice alone makes the heart happy. This is the magic of beauty. Even though he couldn't see her face, he was sure that there was something beautiful under the veil. The girl asked to be forgiven for allowing herself to come at such a time, but there were too many people here during the day, and since she liked silence, she didn't know when the temple would close. Hui replied that he didn't blame her for not knowing, so he invited her in. Hui noticed that the tiger behind continued to look at him. Suddenly, Xiao asked her to stop. She said, "Let Iron Bull and De Huang go in first and see if there is an ambush in this temple, in case there are people around, and it will be bad if they scare the lady." The girl asked as Xiao didn't have to be so rude. She then looked at Hui and asked for permission. Kong said that allowing a big man with a tiger to trot inside the temple is an insult to the Shaolin. Hui asked him to forgive him and said that if they thought the Shaolin was a place to hide malice, they should leave. The girl thought that this young abbot really dared to stop the Iron Bull and De Huang. He is really brave. The Iron Bull got angry and started shouting that the monk dared to stop him and De Huang's tiger. Then he was crazy. He ordered the tiger to go forward. Suddenly the girl shouted for the Iron Bull to stop. But at that moment De Huang had already attacked the abbot. Hui was angry that he dared to attack the Shaolin dignity. Therefore, Hui had no choice but to apply the lion roar. There was an incredible sound. The tiger immediately started whimpering and backing away. Everyone around was incredibly surprised, and the girl couldn't believe that this young abbot was so strong. The brother monk stood there in complete shock. Hua, meanwhile, exhaled and tried to come to his senses. The iron bull got very angry and scattered to attack Hua, shouting that he was a brat, and how dare he. But suddenly the mistress stopped him. The iron bull was surprised, and she apologized and asked him to forgive them for such recklessness. Hua noticed that there was only superficial politeness before, but this time there was actually a hint of respect for him in it. The lady said she begged him again to let her enter the temple to place incense. Hua replied that she could go through. Soon the girl went inside and Hua told her that this was the first level of the statue of the goddess of dripping water. Hua knew that in the previous world, the popularity of bodhisattvas in Buddhism was comparable to that of Buddha. Although Buddhism is not as prosperous in this world as in the previous one, the popularity of bodhisattvas is still high. Suddenly Hua was surprised that the lady was going upstairs. He realized that she was not worshipping the bodhisattva. He noticed that this woman benefactor was offering her homage from the dripping goddess of mercy on the first floor to Buddha Rudra on the 8th floor. But she still hasn't found a Buddha she wants to worship. Hua noticed that this girl was rich, and he was sure she had brought them a lot of money. Finally, the girl went up to the 9th floor and bowed to the statue of Namo Buddha Amitabha. The girl said that Hua accompanied her to the pagoda today, so she hoped he would keep her situation and what she had to say a secret. Hua replied that she could speak freely. Then the girl took off her veil, and turning to face him, she cried. Hua was surprised and frightened to see the girl crying. Meanwhile, the lady lit incense. Hua thought at this moment that luckily he had time to see the world, so he didn't lose his composure, otherwise he would be embarrassed. It was the first time he had seen such a beautiful woman. She couldn't even be compared to those big stars in the last days of the world. She was beautiful. The girl sat down on her knees and began to say that she was the devout daughter of Ning Wanjun, and she earnestly prayed to Buddha to bless her father for a speedy recovery. Ning said she knows her father's injuries are very serious, but he is still holding on so no one can see his pain. And he stayed in that position, which in her opinion meant nothing, but he couldn't leave because he wanted to forget how her mother had died. Hua thought that it seems like this girl was only born with a father in the family. Ning said that his father thought his sorrows would go away if he started practicing martial arts, but the fiends overpowered his mind and forced him to learn evil skills. And when she saw him the other day, his hair turned white. Hua wondered what kind of evil craftsmanship, and what kind of girl. Ning asked the Buddha what she should do, since she has been living with her father since she was a little girl and doesn't want him to leave her, nor does she want him to make her feel like a stranger. Ning sobbed and said that she was very scared and had no way to convince her father and that he just didn't want to hear. And that having heard of the Buddha's miracle, she, the faithful daughter, came specifically to ask for guidance so that the Buddha would show her the way. Hua at this time was thinking about the fact that this girl's tears hurt him, but he couldn't help it. Meanwhile, Ning begged to save her father and burst into tears even harder. Hua came closer to her. He asked her to calm down, but the girl didn't hear him. Then Hua took a deep breath and applied a little roar. Hua asked her to listen to him. Ning was very surprised. She didn't expect such power. Hua realized that using a small lion's roar actually stopped her crying, which was quite useful. Ning apologized and said that she had lost control of herself. She held out her hand for him to stand up. Hua said that there are 7 sufferings in life, which include all kinds of human suffering. Ning asked him to enlighten her on this. Hua said that labor pains refer to the cramped and unpleasant conditions inside the womb. The suffering of old age, when a person grows old and becomes mentally exhausted and weak. Suffering from sickness, when the body aches and there is no rest. The suffering of death, when life is cut short by aging or by accident. Suffering from resentment and hatred when the heart is filled with them, and when what is desired is not fulfilled but harmed. It is often the case that people are too fixated on what they desire so badly. They are very often overly persistent and find themselves locked in a cage, unwilling to give up, which adds to their suffering. Ning replied that the abbess was right, and in many points the noble maiden was too obsessive, but in many ways she could not help herself. Ning asked the abbot to enlighten her about the last suffering. Hua replied that the last suffering is separation. There is no greater pain in life than the pain of love and separation. When a loved one leaves, there is nothing we can do about it. And when a loved one is gone, there is only pain and longing for him or her. Hua said she's not old to experience the pain of not having her lover by her side, but he's sure she's already experienced it. He wondered why she was crying again, and if it was in a past life, he would have put his shoulder up, but not now. Ning said that resentment and hatred, striving and failing to live, old age and death, love and separation, these are the most important words she took in. Ning then said that they say outside that he is the one who can communicate with the Buddha, so she wants to ask him to teach her what she should do next. He asked her to sit down, and at this moment he himself was thinking how he could teach someone with his half-forgotten knowledge of Buddhist scriptures, and this was a trick he could only use once. He took the fish gong and thought that this treasure is really worth it. It helps in anxious moments. He asked that Ning just sit and listen to the monk tapping to calm her mind so that maybe she could think things through. Ning was surprised and asked what one tune could do. And then He made the first beat. Ning found herself on a green floor strewn with beautiful flowers. The girl relaxed and thought how warm the air was, and it seemed to cleanse her soul. She lay there euphoric and talking, as if what had happened to her father wasn't so sad. And she was sure she would find a solution if she took her time. Soon the girl came to her senses and asked the abbot why she had just fallen asleep. He asked how she was feeling. Ning thought that this young abbot had a real ability. Perhaps he knew some secret. Ning bowed and told him that she didn't know how he did it, but through his instruction, she gained enlightenment. He replied that she had exaggerated his capabilities and that he had only helped her think through and let go of her worries. And he also reminded her that she should know that when fate closes a door in front of her, it also opens a window somewhere in the corner. Suddenly the girl took his hands and began to say that she understood everything now, and for now she would not go back to her father. She was sure he would figure it all out. He wondered why she was shaking hands with him, although he knew that he was handsome and attractive, but he was a Shaolin abbot now and couldn't take such actions. Ning was surprised and thought the young abbot was not impressed with her beauty trick. She then said that the Lord of Faith was planning to give the Shaolin a sum of money for incense. It wasn't much, but enough to keep a few people going for 8 or 10 years. Hu was pleased and bowed and thanked her. But suddenly the girl said that she dared not think so now. Then Hu was upset and asked why. Ning replied that although she was a daughter, she knew that money and other worldly things were like floating clouds to the master. At this moment, Hu thought that money was not an everyday thing, and without money, everything turns into a cloud. Ning said that even if a mountain of gold and silver were piled in front of the abbot, she's afraid he wouldn't even look at it. At this moment, Hu thought that he wouldn't just look at it, but he would also take it in his hands. Ning at this time said that it would be a desecration of the abbot and the Shaolin if she repaid it. Hu thought it was sacrilege just the same that she didn't pay. He realized that this girl took him for a high priest and thought he didn't like money, but was still owed the money he had borrowed. Ning said that she was sorry to have bothered the abbot for so long, but now she was calm, and she decided to speak frankly. That when she arrived, she saw a notice on the temple door for disciples. Ning asked if the Shaolin abbot was recruiting female disciples. Hearing this, Hu was horrified and asked, "How is this possible? A girl to be a disciple?" Ning said that female believers could find a place to sleep at the foot of the mountain and come to the Shaolin whenever it was time for morning classes. Hu replied that it was still impossible. Since the Shaolin temple does not accept female disciples, it is an ironclad rule that cannot be broken. He asked in amazement that could sound really purify a person to the point of converting to Buddhism. Ning replied that hearing that sound made her want to stay near the Buddha for a long time, and she was very sorry that the abbot did not allow her to do so. And then Ning said let Iron Bull stay in Shaolin as a disciple instead, so that she could contribute to the development of Shaolin. Hu thought it was the same giant man at the door, and realized that he had really underestimated this woman. After all, just now she had put his guard down by showing her true feelings, and now that she had come to her senses, she had figured him out. Hu also assumed that this expression on her face was part of this calculation. She first said that she wanted to stay in the Shaolin, knowing that she wouldn't succeed, but still brought it up to make this Iron Bull stay in the Shaolin. And since Hu had refused her once, it would be bad to refuse her a second time. This is also a common negotiation tactic used in shopping malls in more recent times. But Hu couldn't understand why she did this, and whether she really wanted to contribute to the development of Shaolin. Hu told her that all beings have Buddha nature, and the Shaolin has always opened its doors for convenience. And it's fine if Tainyo wants to stay in the Shaolin, but he has to pass the test first. Soon, when Xiao heard that Iron Bull wanted to stay in the Shaolin, she was very surprised and had a strange reaction. Ning apologized to Abbott for Zhao's behavior like this, who replied that it was fine. Xiao asked Madam why they should leave the Iron Bull behind. After all, he is stupid, and why don't they find someone smart and reliable at the main altar? Ning said that the Iron Bull may be stupid, but he is a sincere person, and she is sure he will serve the Buddha well. At this moment, Ning thought that precisely because Iron Bull was stupid, he was the best person for the job, and a smart one would definitely be a bad candidate. She realized that even when she showed her real face in the pagoda, she hadn't caused the Shaolin abbot the slightest change of heart. It was said that he also believed in the sincerity of the Iron Bull's desire to serve the Buddha, and he could join the others in the examination tomorrow. However, Wood didn't understand what this woman's purpose was, since she decided to make Tai Nyo stay in the temple. Perhaps there is some secret related to the temple. Ning meanwhile thought that at first glance it seemed like there was no kung fu, but the roar in front of the gate was clearly the roar of a Buddhist lion that had reached a high level. Ning then said that the abbot could test the Iron Bull, but if he was unable to do so, he could let it go on its own and the lady would leave. Hor realized that she was obviously procrastinating. Ning said, "Let the tiger go into the forest to come to the rescue in time if the Shaolin temple needed him." Xiao felt sad and thought, what if he didn't have enough food or sleep if he stayed in the forest? And why should the Iron Bull stay in the temple? Suddenly, Xiao realized that the tiger was the best at finding things. She smiled and thought that Miss was so smart. After all, she had openly left the Iron Bull in the Shaolin temple, and in the dark, she had asked De Huang to look for that one. When noticed that this girl was smiling like a bad person, Xiao meanwhile escorted the tiger out. Ning then told Abbott that she had always wondered in her heart if he wanted to know Wang Juan's true identity. Ho replied that in the eyes of his Buddha everyone is equal, and even though the girl's status is noble, but in the eyes of the poor monk everyone is equal. After that, Ning told Xiao that it was already deep night, and it was time for them to leave. Xiao agreed. Ho reflected that she was beautiful, skilled in martial arts, had power and status, and a tiger as a pet. But she also has a father who practices malice, so he's afraid she's an unrighteous person. And that was why Ho assumed that this girl was a demon disciple. The next day came. The Shaolin Temple continued to recruit disciples, and Iron Bull was among the applicants, passing the tests after everyone else. If he passes the final test of character, he can become a lay disciple of the Shaolin. After several rounds of tests this time, surprisingly, there were a dozen people who made it to the last level in the test. He notified everyone that the last test would begin in half an hour, and during that time, they could move around freely, but they were not allowed to leave the first level of the tower. The apprentice said that in half an hour they could gather around him, while now they could relax. Meanwhile, He was sat in his seat and asked the Iron Bull why he shouldn't take a walk, since it wasn't time yet. The Iron Bull replied that he would be here to protect the abbot. He asked in surprise if he thought the abbot was capable of protecting himself. Iron Bull replied that Abbott seemed to have some skills, but he still had to protect him like the lady said. He meanwhile realized that if the strong body received the lion's roar, it would not be able to remain unharmed. He then took a deep breath, and the Iron Bull realized that this monk was about to make that strange sound again. However, Wood just exhaled and politely asked for the Iron Bull to go for a walk. He realized that since he wanted to work under him in the future, he must be obedient enough to do so. Whether he listened to his mistress or his sister, he must listen to the abbot in the temple. Meanwhile, one of the challengers discovered a gold coin on the floor and immediately picked it up off the floor while no one could see. One was watching everyone from the sidelines, though, and noticed it. Soon half an hour had passed. It was said that time was up and they should bow for a moment. Then he announced that the disciple recruitment exam was officially over. Everyone around them was surprised and asked the abbot that the last test hadn't even started, and how could it end? He replied that Shaolin is a Buddhist sect, and the first thing a Buddhist sect looks at when choosing a disciple is a person's heart. He said that he had placed a total of 120 copper plates on this floor. And during the break, everyone found copper plates singly or together, but everyone behaved differently. Suddenly, Ho informed him that there were actually only 2 people who had passed the test. It was Iron Bull and the Su Boy. Ho said that collecting gold is a kind of beneficence, and they distribute the gold to help the needy and do good. So they must not think a mere coin is a trifle, and not to think of evil as a trifle and good as a trifle. It is necessary to accumulate good in order to bring down evil. The frustrated applicants left the temple, and as they left, each of them blamed themselves for being too greedy and missing the opportunity to enter the temple. Meanwhile, Hui introduced the first Shaolin disciple, Huang Feihong, and said that this was now their big brother. Iron Bull and the Su Boy bowed. Hui said that they would become Shaolin disciples after they went with him to pay their respects to the ancestors. They set off, and on the way Hui asked the boy why he was called Su. Su said that he grew up a beggar, always asking for food, and no one gave him a name, so everyone started calling him Su Boy. Hui told him that being a beggar while picking up money is not a bad thing, and today he will give him a worldly name, Su Chong. It means a bright future. The boy cried and bowed, and began to thank him for having a name now. Hui asked him to stand up, as he would henceforth be a Shaolin disciple and not a lonely beggar. Soon they lit incense in honor of the ancestors. Hui thought that although he had never met the old abbot, he had inherited the memories. He realized that he owed his skill to the old abbot, but he also loved his disciple and wanted Jie to have some achievements. Hui also knew that although the child's skill was relatively pathetic, but his inner strength was pure, but only until his body became broken, after completing all the kung fu techniques. Hui told the three disciples that they had entered the Shaolin temple, and even though they were secular disciples, they also represented the temple, so they should respect their master. Unexpectedly, brothers Kong and Iching came and asked that the abbot take a look at it. They brought the garment and said it was from Master Qian. Some time ago, Hui had asked him to find someone to take care of it. Shaolin is different now, and it is time to change the monk's robes. Kong said that this material costs a lot of money, and lately the Shaolin has been using a lot of silver. Hui was delighted. He replied that it was all right, and people depended on their clothes and horses on their saddles. He realized that the neat and clean robes of the monks were also a means of promoting his temple. A month had passed, the disciples were actively practicing, and even the Su Boy was no longer like the old version of himself. Hui praised him and said such great progress in less than a month. He was very talented in martial arts. Su bowed and replied that it was Master Iching who had taught him so well. Iching immediately became embarrassed. Hui said that there was no need to be modest, and if he had not worked and studied so hard, he would not have succeeded. Hui then called Su to meet the guest. It wasn't long before men came in and reported in a panic that there was a group of people outside the mountain gate who wanted to see the abbot. Hui speculated that it might be someone from the Fuwang temple. After all, he had promised that they would meet again. So Hui took his disciple with him and went to the gate. Hui was greatly surprised to see a whole army of soldiers at the temple gate. Suddenly, Hui saw Master Xiong in front of him. He said that they hadn't seen each other for a month and asked how the abbot was doing. Hui came over and said that he was satisfied with everything. Xiong then introduced the abbot to Mr. Guang and said that he was the only one who could communicate with the Buddha. Guan asked, wondering if he could really be great at such a young age. And it seems that this time he had made another trip in vain. Xiong told Guang Yu that although the abbot is young, he has real ability. If he waited a little longer, the abbot would do something special for him. Guan replied that since he was here anyway, it was okay to listen. Hui at this moment couldn't believe that they were talking about him in his own presence, and if they weren't in the army. Xiong then said that they came here from the sectmaster's residence after a subordinate talked to him about Shaolin. Hui replied that medicine cures the sick, but Buddha guides the doomed, and he could see that Master Guan did not trust him. And if so, Hui thinks he doesn't have a destiny with the Shaolin, so they should go back. Guan got angry and asked if this little monk knew what price he would pay for this statement, and whether it was the soldiers behind his back or him. Destroying the Shaolin would be the easiest thing for him. Suddenly, Hui laughed very loudly. Su at this moment thought, how can the abbot laugh in such a situation? He is a monk. Meanwhile, Hui said that he was a monk and had been listening to the Buddha's teachings since he was young and knew that everything was deceptive. He asked what their swords and weapons could do to him. Guan asked if he was not afraid of death. Hui replied that he would never trade the peace of Shaolin for Master Guan's enlightenment. So why should the poor monk be afraid? Hui realized that this old man had status and ability, and if they didn't change his mind, he wouldn't take the Shaolin seriously, let alone respect it. Guan at this moment thought that this abbot was truly extraordinary. Xiong asked the abbot not to take offense, as Master Guan was only joking with him, and no one would take offense to a person who could communicate with a Buddha. Hui asked if Master Guan really wouldn't destroy his temple. Guan bowed and replied that he wouldn't dare. Hui replied that this was pleasing and asked for Su to close the door. Xiong and Guan stood in bewilderment. They couldn't believe that he would just leave them here. Suddenly the door opened, and Guan thought they would be let in after all. However, it was Su. He handed him a blanket and told him that it was going to be cold right now, so they should take this so they wouldn't get sick. Guan turned around and started to walk away. Xiong asked him not to be impulsive again. But suddenly Guan took a blanket and asked him to thank the abbot for his kindness, and he would stay outside the gate for the night. Xiong suggested that Guangyu go down the mountain, find an inn, and return to Shaolin in the morning. Guan said that nothing more needed to be said, and that he had decided everything already. He could afford to wait 10 days or 100, let alone one night. Xiong reminded about the festival lord's order. Guan said that they should hurry back as the Buddhist sect was a pure place, and they, the people with swords, had no place here. Guan then looked at Xiong menacingly and asked him that did he really want him to drive him away himself. Xiong replied that they were already leaving and asked that Guan be careful not to catch a cold. Night came. Guan continued to sit at the gate of the Shaolin temple, bowing. Meanwhile, Su approached the abbot and said that he was really cool, because the old man is really waiting at the temple. Was said that when someone takes the initiative to ask another person, they are not impressed, and even think they are a liar. And when you ignore him, he thinks you have real skills and stick up for him. That's the bad nature of man. Su thanked him for his wisdom, and Hua told him to go rest. Hua went to practice his skills. His martial arts had improved greatly over the past time, and the true qi in his body showed signs of flowing. And when true qi can flow throughout his body, he will be considered to have entered the middle Hotian stage. Suddenly, the system alerted that the July lottery was open and asked if Hua would play. Hua has studied the pattern of light points in previous drawings, and the distance between the starting point and the prize is significantly different. So Hua got together to calculate this lottery. In the last raffle, there were 14 squares between the lions or squares and the grand prize. He thought that if the bright spots are regular, this time he should choose the Bodhisattva precept book. If the judgment is not accurate, the light dots will likely fall to the left or right of the grand prize, and a useless item will be drawn this time. But Hua decided to take the risk. He began to say that the poor monk was willing to exchange the idle life of his brother master for a correct judgment of the lottery law. Suddenly, the system alerted that 3 chances for the lottery drawing had been received, asking if Hua would use them. Hua started shouting that of course he would take advantage of it, especially there was a pattern that a poor monk would become rich. Suddenly, the system alerted that 1 piece of self-description, 1 piece of mountain gate order, and 1 reed had been received. And suddenly something like a portal appeared in the system. Hua was scared and thought that whether the system had crashed and there was a virus. And then horse hooves appeared from that portal, which prescribed a punch to Hua right in the jaw. Hua was startled and asked what the hell. An incredibly beautiful horse looked at him. Hua walked up to it and realized that it was indeed a white horse. He realized that with her, he would become more respectable when he went out into the white world. Hua then smiled broadly and said that life was getting better and better, and so was his mood. However, Hua realized that the construction of the structures could be explained by the miracle of the Buddha, but this white horse could not be a gift from the Buddha. So he escorted her out and told her that she could go in and stop at the entrance to the 10,000 Buddhas pagoda. Hua then began to read that the advantage of this technique was that it did not require internal force. And as long as there is a place to take some power, a person can stay light all the time. According to legend, a Dharma teacher once broke a reed and threw it into the river, standing on it to cross the Yangtze River. To cross the Yangtze River with a reed, you have to ride the reed, resisting the wind and waves on the river, and Hua doesn't have that kind of strength yet. Hua decided that when he reached a certain level of inner strength, he would also be able to accomplish the feat of crossing the river using the reeds. And as for this book, now that I Ching Iron Head Kung Fu has yet to be practiced to a small degree, it's not worth giving it such a high level of ease. And none of the others are made to learn martial arts. Hua thought that it was a good thing that not everyone in Shaolin had to know martial arts, so in the future it would be enough for only monks to practice the arts. Hua then went outside and decided to try some light kung fu. He used a couple of techniques and literally floated in the air. After making a couple turns and landing smoothly, Hua said it was perfect. Hua was standing on the roof, and suddenly someone addressed him. He turned around and saw Guan standing there. The surprised Guan began to ask the abbot who he was. Hua thought at that moment that he had forgotten that the old man had not left. Suo came down and asked Guan if he had rested yet. Guan replied that he was going to rest, but when he heard the sound, he came to greet him. Hua understood that the purpose of this old man's visit to the Shaolin was to find the tools of Buddhist magic, and at present, Hua only had wooden fish in his possession. Guan asked the abbot if he had anything to say. Hua looked at him and realized that he would calm down if he didn't satisfy him. So Hua told him that the abbot had seen the Buddha again in a dream. Guan was surprised and asked if he had really communicated with the Buddha. Hua replied that the Buddha often confided dreams to him. Guan began to ask what the Buddha had said. Hua said that the Buddha had entrusted him with a dream that he would again manifest a miracle and grant him a mountain gate in the Shaolin. Guan said it was a miracle and that he was 60 years old, but he had never seen a Buddha miracle, and he had never seen anything related to the Buddha nature. Guan also said that his fondest wish is to get an object blessed by the Buddha, and he hopes that the abbot will allow him to see the miracles of the Buddha. Hua then asked how he imagined that the miracles could be seen by outsiders while they were descending. Guan began to say that he was not considered an outsider, and he was also a follower of a Buddha, and had the same opportunity, and he should see. Then Hua told him that if Guan should follow him, the poor monk would have to leave everything behind, and he is young and strong, and Guan will not be able to keep up with him. Guan stayed where he was and thought that if one looked at the entire central China, there were only 5 people with weaker skills than him. So Guan shouted for the abbot not to try to get rid of him, as he would still observe the Buddha's miracle. Guan realized that if the abbot had such profound martial arts skills at such a young age, then this young abbot was incredibly strong. Hua, meanwhile, was sure that Guan was watching him and decided to let him see the miracle with his own eyes. Hua applied the technique and said that he would see what Guan would do after that. Then he took the card and threw it against the ground. Hua sat on the ground and the construction card started to take effect. Guan watched from the side and couldn't believe his eyes. Hua began to recite the words, Namo Amitabha Buddha. Seeing all this, Guan almost went mad with delight. Soon a gate of incredible beauty formed above Hua's head. Hua bowed and said that he congratulated the Buddha. At this moment, Hua thought about the fact that Guan had finally seen that Buddha miracle he had been chasing after so much. A surprised and delighted Guan looked at this and said, "It's simply unbelievable." Then Guan cried and said that Buddha is above everything. And it was decided that from today he would become a monk and disappear into the void. Will become an eternal servant of the Buddha and will no longer have anything to do with the affairs of the Red World. Hearing this, Hua was frightened. Guan said that he had a request for the abbot and asked the abbot to initiate him into the sand. So from today, Guan wanted to be a Shaolin disciple. Hua replied that he was too old to enter his Shaolin. And now that the Buddha's miracle had come true, he should leave as soon as possible. Although Hua had wanted Guan to join Shaolin from the beginning, he was afraid that he would not value what he had gotten too easily. Therefore, Hua decided that he would have to beg him 3 times before he would reluctantly let him into the Shaolin. Guan said to the abbot not to look at age, for his martial arts had already reached great perfection in the Hotian realm. He also said that he could see that the Shaolin was still recruiting students and needed someone to teach martial arts. Hua asked if he thought the abbot would not be able to teach. Guan replied that the abbot's kung fu is unrivaled in the world, but since the abbot is a noble man, he cannot teach talentless youths on his own. Guan said that he had a weak son, but he was a minister, so if someone from the government disturbed the temple, he could deal with it. Hua turned around and told Guan to be careful what he said. Meanwhile, Hua realized that it was for this purpose and gave him the opportunity to see the miracle. It was all for the sake of connections. With this support from the sectarians, neither Nu, Li Xian, nor Fuwang Temple would attack Shaolin anymore, and the development of the temple would go more smoothly. Hua also realized that Guan had martial arts skills and experience, and it was the kind of talent the Shaolin desperately needed, not to mention that he had seen a miracle and would have no problem with loyalty. Meanwhile, Guan assured the abbot that he could teach and read. Hua replied that no means no, and he must return to the temple. Guan fell to his knees. Hua told him that he was not meant to be a Buddha, and why force himself like that? Guan replied that since the abbot did not want to receive him, he took out his knife. Hua got angry. His lion roar erupted. He shouted, "What is Guan going to do?" Seeing the image of the lion, Guan was even more shocked. He immediately threw his knife on the ground. He stammered and began to say that he wasn't trying to disrespect the abbot, he was. After saying that, he grabbed the knife again and pointed it at his chest. Hua started screaming to stop it. However, Guan merely cut off his beard. Hua was surprised and exhaled in relief. Guan completely got rid of the vegetation on his face and said that he had shown his true desire, so he hoped to join the Shaolin. Hua couldn't understand what was wrong with this old man. So he told him that there was no need to suffer. And if Guan is truly sincere in his intentions, he will accept him as a disciple. Guan began to thank him. Guan at this moment was proud of himself for being so smart. He begged, kneeled, shaved his head, and finally impressed this callous abbot. Morning came. The Shaolin disciples gathered around the table and recited a prayer to the Buddha to bless their food so that it would be like medicine for healing. And let food be used like the water of wisdom to instill peace in all living beings and increase the roots of wisdom. Suddenly, Hua entered and greeted everyone. Then he pointed to Guan and said that he was the new disciple. Everyone welcomed him, and Hua said that he would be responsible for teaching them martial arts in the future. Iching said that it was wonderful, and he would study carefully. Guan said that he would be sure to teach them everything he knows himself. At this moment, Guan thought that he had entered the temple later than Zhen and Ming, but neither of them had received the title of first master from the abbot. Hua thought about how if there was a teacher to guide him personally, he would soon become a better master. And the Su boy is extremely talented in martial arts, and with Guan as an expert, he will definitely surpass Iching in time. Hua thought that after that, let Iching, Kong, Su, and Tainyo train other disciples, and soon the temple would have a martial arts system. Suddenly Wan walked in and Hua asked what was wrong. Wan began to shout that a terrible thing had happened. And then he said that a miracle had also appeared in Fong Temple. Hearing this, everyone present was shocked. Hua said, since the miracle appeared in the Shaolin Temple, Buddhist followers from the surrounding area have constantly come to see the miracle of the 10,000 Buddha pagoda. And later, the Shaolin Temple began to recruit disciples, which raised people's enthusiasm. The prosperity of Shaolin inevitably led to the decline of Fuwang Temple. And so it is quite expected that Fuwang during this period quietly created a so-called miracle ready to compete with Shaolin. Guan asked, what kind of miracle is this? And are miracles really just cabbages? After all, he had seen the miracles of Shaolin with his own eyes for the first time in his life. Guan said that was right, and they must have a counterfeit miracle. Then he asked the abbot what they should do, since they are going to have a fair at the temple on July 8th to celebrate the fake miracle. Guan said that on his way here, he noticed that some people had already started talking about it. Guan said that he had once gone there to look for something with Buddha nature, but old man Li Kuan had brought him a bunch of rags to fool him, and if it hadn't been a Buddhist temple, he would have torn it down. Guan said that if the abbot gave the order, he would go to Fuwang Temple and burn it to the ground, and look at those who dared to come to the Shaolin to take revenge. Hua asked him not to be reckless as the abbot had already realized what he wanted to do, and there was no need to say more. Hua said that Buddha blessed Shaolin and only Shaolin, and he knows that their miracles are false, but it's good that there is such a possibility. I mean, if they want to compete, let them compete. And it's just their choice and their game. The next day came, Su was cleaning the courtyard, and suddenly Guan came and told the abbot that it was for him from a monk of Fuwang Temple. Hua looked at this letter and thought it was from the La Dharma Temple. Could it be Li Xian? He started reading, and it said that the abbot of Fuwang Temple, Li Kong, was writing to him, and he would be 72 years old this year. He had studied Buddhism since he was a child, and at the age of 9 he became an official disciple of the temple. At the age of 17 he performed pujas and was accepted by all parties. At the age of 30 he became abbot, and at the age of 45 he became abbot. And even so, he dares not say that he is communicating with the Buddha. And Hua is a young monk, less than 20 years old, has been abbot for 2 days and dares to deceive the people. And he prayed day and night to the Buddha for guidance. And the Buddha relented and sent down the Mahamuni temple in the sky to pierce Hua's skin and reveal the Buddha's true intention. Hua read this and said that he had been thinking about how to deal with them, but now they had shown up first. And now you shouldn't accuse Hua of being ruthless. Guan asked why the abbot said so, and Hua replied that it was merely a method of provoking a hypocrite, as could be seen at a glance. Guan read the letter and said that their temple was nothing and Hua would be doing them a favor if he went there, so he asked to be allowed to go with him. Hua looked at him and said that he had a plan for Guan, and said that he needed to go downstairs in a moment. Guan came down and said that he was going to make everything look beautiful and make their opening ceremony a great spectacle. 3 days later at Fuwang Temple, residents came to the temple for a ceremony to see the Buddha's miracle. People were surprised that underneath that red cloth was the very miracle. Suddenly, a white beautiful horse appeared among the crowd, with Hua sitting on top of it and Guan walking beside him. The temple monk greeted them and asked if they had an invitation. Guan handed him the invitation. The monk was surprised that the invitation was crumpled, and thought that the abbot of the Shaolin temple was really here. Guan got angry and asked how dare he detain a guest invited by the abbot of Fuwang temple. The monk apologized and let them pass. Hua, meanwhile, jumped off his horse and told Guan to follow him. Guan left the horse to the monk and said that the sacred horse only eats the best grass, so this must be controlled. Hua noticed that people were being given food, and said that they were smart enough to realize that this miracle propaganda was not credible, so they came up with the idea of distributing porridge. And all this to attract the homeless. Guan said it was so hypocritical and low for the temple. Guan also said that the starting point was the competition with the Shaolin. It was a good deed to benefit poor people. Hua looked around and said that it looked like the Fuwang temple had put in a lot of effort this time. Guan spotted a good spot with some shade and suggested that the abbot go there. Hua agreed. Meanwhile, the abbot of Fuwang temple welcomed Governor Liu and said they were happy to see him. The governor also greeted them, and suddenly Master Li noticed that the abbot of the Shaolin temple was also here. The abbot told Master Li that the opening ceremony was about to begin, and it was necessary to inform the disciples sooner rather than later. The abbot then asked what was wrong with him. Li angrily replied that it was him, and that he would recognize him even in the ashes. The abbot reassured Li and said that they would embarrass him today, and the ceremony was about to begin, so arrangements needed to be made. The abbot began the ceremony and said that due to the love of the Buddha, heaven has sent down a hall of merit and virtues to Fuwang temple, and the temple is holding this opening ceremony to invite everyone to see this miracle. Master Li said that recently there have been many rumors on Mount Shaoshi, and some minor sects claim to have received a miracle from a Buddha, which is really absurd. And today, he would like to allow the residents to share merit and virtues, but he also wants them to be vigilant and not be deceived by some sects with ulterior motives. Someone in the crowd said that they had seen with their own eyes the miracle of the Shaolin temple, and one day there was no weather and the next day it appeared. Others supported, saying that it couldn't be a hoax. Master Li said that these people must have been asked to come here by a young monk from the Shaolin temple. And he also said that this monk is a liar living off loans, and his so-called miracles are just a way to cheat people to pay back their loans. The villagers asked indignantly how dare he spit in the face of others, and they said they had come here because they had been promised a bowl of porridge and 2 buns for watching the ceremony. And if it wasn't for that bowl of porridge, who would want to come all that way? People began to ask if the miracle was real, for it could have been secretly built. Master Li became even more angry. Guan meanwhile smiled and told the abbot that justice is in the heart, or replied that he couldn't pretend, couldn't fake, and couldn't live with his sins. Meanwhile, the crowd was actively discussing whether the miracle could have been built secretly, and since they had not seen it with their own eyes, it was unknown whether it was true or not. Suddenly the monk, who had been silent all this time, coughed a few times to stop the gossip. At this moment, Hua thought that this old monk's inner strength was very strong, at least the Hotian Great Circle for sure. The old monk introduced himself and said that he was the abbot of Sangoku Temple in the capital city. Then he said, Master Li noticed the Shaolin abbot here. Hua at this moment thought that this master might even be an ascended master. He didn't expect that the Fuwang temple had such a bad character. Hua then stepped forward and introduced himself, saying that he was ashamed that Master Li had only met him with his eyes. People were saying at this moment that this was indeed the Zen master of the great Sangoku temple before whom the emperor was to bow before meeting. Zen master said that since ancient times, heroes have emerged from youth, and he heard that the Shaolin abbot is favored by the Buddha. He is exceptionally gifted and intelligent, and so he needs his advice. Hua bowed and said that he wondered what Master Li Ji of Sangoku wanted to ask him, and said that he could feel free to ask if he didn't understand something. Master Li meanwhile told Li Jin that this boy had a sharp tongue and was not easy to deal with, so it was best not to fall for his tricks. Then the Zen master began to relate that a man came to the temple to worship a Buddha and saw a man worshipping the goddess of mercy beside him. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that this person was actually a goddess of mercy kept in the temple. And then Zen asked the Shaolin abbot, why does Kuan Yin worship Kuan Yin? At this moment, Hua was well aware that it was an illusion created by an internal force. Hua said that it is important to seek Buddhahood, but one should never place one's entire destiny on Buddhahood. One should rely on oneself first. And this is the Bodhisattva's step of warning the world. It is better to ask yourself than others. Then Master Zen said that a warrior holding a live fish in his hand asked Abbot Ring whether the fish was alive or dead. How should the abbot have answered? At this moment, Guan thought that if the answer was that the fish was dead, the samurai would let it go. If it was alive, the samurai would squeeze it to death. Regardless, the answer would be wrong. Suddenly Hu replied that the poor monk had guessed that the fish was dead. Master Li began to laugh and said he was foolish. Because when the samurai released the fish, it fell down and was still alive, and the abbot guessed wrong. Hu bowed and said he guessed wrong, but the fish survived and it was worth it. Master Li started yelling at him not to get smart here, as he had created a rumor that none of them had seen the Buddha miracle. Zen asked to remain calm. Then Hu looked at Master Li and said that he had a stone in his hand, asking if he believed it or not. Li asked how he could know that if he didn't see it. Then Hu opened his hand and a stone fell from there. He asked Li, what he didn't see doesn't exist. Zen said that these matters could be discussed later as it was almost a favorable time to get on with the opening ceremony. The auspicious time came, and the opening ceremony of the miracles at Fuwang Monastery began with the recognition of the Buddha's miracles. The monks began to pull down the red cloth. Suddenly there were the delighted voices of people who were amazed. The abbot said that the Great Hero Hall is 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, containing the real body of a Buddha, 4 bodhisattva statuettes, and 4 portraits of bodhisattvas. And also 4 bodhisattvas, 500 Luohan statues, and they all came to their temple a month ago. Hu said he was afraid that he could not have acquired such a building without 100,000 taels. The abbot told me that this door is 1 foot thick and no one can push it without divine power. Hu said that this door is worth a few dozen taels. The abbot turned and replied, "At what for?" Then the rector came to his senses and thought he had been set up and almost fell for it. Then he said that the doors of the temple were now officially open. So everyone can prepare incense, and as soon as the doors open, they can enter. The people crowded around the entrance in anticipation. Suddenly the people began to scream in terror. The abbot asked what was the matter. Then he turned around and saw a huge, horrible snake right on top of the Buddha statue. The abbot began to scream in fear, and the snake immediately bit his face. The monks ran to his aid. Master Li ran up to the abbot and found that he was already dead. Master Zen, meanwhile, was looking up at the sky. He cried and said that the poor monk's sins were to blame. The master asked him where he was going. The Zen master replied that from today the poor monk would close the door of death and repent before the Buddha. Meanwhile, Master Li also began to lament that there had been so much planning and all the hard work was for naught. And suddenly in anger, he started shouting that he knew for a fact that it was all the abbot of the Shaolin temple. Hu asked him not to speak nonsense, for the Buddha had blamed and sent down punishment, and how could a poor monk be blamed? Master Li yelled for Hu to stop being sly, as the Buddha statue can't change by itself, and he was the one who did something to it. Hu replied that there were 2 sacred Buddha relics in Shaolin, and if Li could destroy them, so be it, but the poor monk would never do such a thing. Suddenly Hu began to say with a lion's roar that if the Buddha statues break, it only means that the miracles are fake and are being used to deceive. Hu shouted that one should not fake miracles, deceive people, take the opportunity to enrich oneself and insult the Buddhist sect. Then Hu turned around and said that he did not wish to be in their company, and it was a mistake to come here today, so he would return to the Shaolin and repent before the Buddha. Hu began to leave, and people wished him a good journey and said that they dreamed of visiting Shaolin. Meanwhile, Master Li went to see Master Chen. He said he had something to tell him. Li said the story has spread throughout Danfeng County, so he wants to address the issue. Chen asked what Master Li wanted. After all, did he still want to fight when the defeat of Fuwang Temple had already been decided? Master Li then said that if Chen helped him defeat the Shaolin Temple, then all of Fuwang Temple's income for the next 5 years would be his. Chen replied that it was a good deal, and they agreed, shaking hands. After the failure of the opening ceremony of the Fuwang Temple, the temple was severely thinned. After that, there were no more incense bearers in the temple. At that time, Sue's boy came to the market to get some produce. The woman said that next time she would leave the freshest cabbage for the abbot. Venerable Aikong announced the dissolution of Fuwang Temple and then disappeared without a trace. The monks, big and small, sought their own way. And only Master Li and 4 or 5 martial monks vowed to take revenge on the Shaolin. The Su boy bought the necessary groceries and was on his way to the temple when suddenly he was attacked saying that they had finally caught him. Su immediately turned around and used a technique. He dodged and threw several punches. The brigand said he was good, and if he hadn't been a lackey to this vulture, he would have taken him in as his little brother. Su became angry and shouted that he dared not insult the abbot. The robber replied that not only would he insult the vulture, but he would beat Su. After saying that, he attacked Su. But the boy reacted in time and blocked his blow, and then attacked back. The brigand was barely able to stay on his feet from that blow. He wanted to use a couple more techniques, but he couldn't. Suddenly a man came up and held the robber down so that he would not fall. Then the man asked, "Is it a quality of their temple to fight in the street?" Su sensed this person's incredible energy and aura, and realized that he was very dangerous. Chen looked at Su, smiled, and then used several techniques, after which Su couldn't even stand up. Chen then tossed the paper to him and told him to keep his life and give this to Abbott. The brigand left with Master Chen, and Chen asked him if he was all right, calling him Little Master. The villagers ran up to Su and tried to help him. Some told him to go to Shaolin as soon as possible. Some said that it was a sin to raise a hand on a small child. After a while, Su lay motionless on the bed in the Shaolin. Guan couldn't contain his anger. He screamed and asked how could this be? He wanted to go and take his anger out on those bastards. Ho replied that Master Chen had always been smart, but this time he dared to attack his students right outside. And the reason is this letter, was said. On the first day of August, he will hold the Dingfeng ring to challenge the Shaolin. Guan got even more angry and asked how dare he? Ho said that it was said that Chen had recently gotten close to Masterly, and most likely promised something to Chen to get him to provoke the Shaolin. Guan said a snake and a rat in the same nest. Guan then asked what their next move would be, and if Ho wants to, he will go and kill them. But if Ho doesn't want to be a nuisance, they can call themselves a Buddhist sect and stay out of the way. Ho thought that it was true that the Buddhist sects could avoid the long-planned tournament, but that wasn't what he wanted. Ho remembered his second task. Shaolin should become the #1 sect and martial arts league, which meant that sooner or later, Shaolin should enter Jianghu. After the opening ceremony of the Dharma King's temple, Ho drew the first half of the Kung Fu of the dragon and elephant and the Kung Fu of one reed crossing the river. Ho became strong as a martial artist of the middle of the rear bowl. Ho realized that with an expert like Guan as his secret weapon, there was no way Shaolin would lose. Ho told Guang Yu that if he didn't go for it, he was afraid that many people, including him, would feel resentful. Guan replied that nothing in this world can be hidden from the abbot, and they can't be bullied in Shaolin just like that. It's enmity and they have to answer. Ho read this invitation and began to shout that how dare he negotiate with him on the terms of the languishing temple. They clearly underestimate him. Ho asked for a pen and paper. He began to write. To fight in the ring, the stakes must be equal, and if Chen wants to participate in the fight, he must show sincerity. Ho wrote his terms, and Guan said that as expected from the temple abbot, not only did the Shaolin not slow down, but also challenged Master Chen. Ho said that Chen wants the wolves empty-handed, but it also depends on whether Ho agrees. Also was said that Chen has been in Dingfeng for years, so he must have money. Ho was very happy that they could also make a profit from it. Guan asked him to be a little more careful with the ink. Rumors soon spread that a fight with Chen would take place on July 15th. Some wanted to keep their heads down to avoid getting into trouble. Some were sure that Shaolin would win. Suddenly a very strange man appeared in the marketplace. He looked carefully at the inhabitants and said that he wanted to recognize them. The girls were surprised that he was so big and assumed he was from Bulls. A man asked where the best restaurant was. The girl was surprised he was looking for a restaurant and thought he probably wasn't here to eat people. Then the girl told him that there is a restaurant in Danfeng County, and the white chicken and beef and soy sauce are the best, and the aged flower wine is the most delicious. The man went there. He went inside and asked the guy if he was going to cook food and wine for him and why he was standing there. The guy was embarrassed and replied that this seat was reserved by Mr. Liu. The man smiled and replied that it was no big deal, and asked simply to be allowed to speak directly to the gentleman when he arrived. The guy apologized and said that this gentleman was no ordinary gentleman. He was the son of the richest man in Dafeng, Liu Yunhe. Suddenly, the guy heard someone behind his back telling Mr. Liu to come visit whenever he wanted. The boy realized that something was about to happen. This Liu was sent by his father to study martial arts at school when he was 8 years old. He didn't learn martial arts very well, but he made a lot of friends. And all day long he wanders around and causes trouble in Danfeng County. Meanwhile, the guy greeted him and said that he must have traveled a hard road. Lu gave him a silver coin and told him that it was already a pretty old technique. The guy was embarrassed and said that he wasn't looking for a reward and asked if Grandmaster Lu could eat later. Lu immediately slapped him in the face and told him that how dare he dispose of his food without fear of him trashing his damn diner. Then the guy apologized and said that his seat was unfortunately taken, and although he asked to vacate the seat, it didn't work out. Lu got even more angry and asked who dared to take his place. He told his brother and sister to go with him to meet the man. Soon Lu walked over to the man and put his foot on his desk. The man was surprised and asked what was the matter. Lu called him a wild man and asked him where he popped out from and why didn't he give way to Master Lu right now. The man got angry and asked who he called a savage. Lu laughed and said that he had called him a savage. Upon hearing this, the man didn't hold back. He jumped up and started yelling that he hated being called that. Lu and his friends immediately grabbed their weapons. However, the man repulsed their attacks with a single blow of his weapon. Suddenly, the girl behind his back asked if the savage wanted to turn around and get it right. However, the man turned around and grabbed her arm and spun her around and fended off the others with it. The girl flew to the far wall. The others immediately rushed to her aid. At this time, Hua and Guan were sitting in the restaurant on the second floor. Guan said that Qian had deliberately used his connections to defeat Shaolin, to invite a wide range of great men to Defeng County to help fight. And this Iron Walker Yushan is one of Qian's invited masters. It is said that he once wanted to become a monk, but because his fighting spirit was too strong, he was not accepted into the temple, so he took on an iron ring armor and called himself a walker. And frankly, even Guan, the person who is about to enter the Ascendant at the completion of Hotian, has a very bad headache from it. Hua smiled and said that was why they were here today. At this time, Lu's friends managed to throw the walker out the window. He fell to the ground and lost consciousness from blood loss. At that moment, Lu ran up and started shouting that he would kill him. Lu raised his weapon to stab at him. Suddenly, a small stone flew into his leg. Lu turned around and shouted who dared to throw that stone at him. Suddenly, he saw Hua on a white horse in front of him. Hua said that all creatures are stupid and kill each other, and since he had encountered this today, he would definitely not allow any more battles here. Lu said that this brat had injured one of his Song Mountain sect, so he must die. Hua said that this has to stop today, and if he still has the strength to fight, then he can go after the poor monk. Lu began to ask if the weaselly stinking monk thought he was afraid of him. Meanwhile, Hua loaded the body of the walker onto the horse. Lu was surprised, for the barbarian weighed at least 200 pounds, and the monk lifted him so easily. Lu asked the monk who he was. Hua smiled and replied that he was the abbot of the Shaolin. The people around him immediately began to tell Lu that the abbot was a divine person and he could communicate with a Buddha, and they advised him to obey. After a while, two demonic entities tried to take Shan Yu away, saying that his life was over. The demon grabbed the walker's face and told him not to resist. At that moment, Shan shouted. And when he opened his eyes, he realized someone was punching him in the face to wake him up. Hua said he finally woke up. Shan asked why his face hurt so much. Hua smiled and said that this was a Shaolin temple and he was the abbot. Shan said that he remembered that it had saved him. A Shaolin abbot who was said to communicate with Buddha. Hua bowed and said he was not the one who saved him. Shan said that before he lost consciousness, he clearly saw a bald head. Hua said that he had saved himself, and if not for his persistence, even if the abbot had come, it would have been too late to save him. Shan looked at him admiringly and said he wanted to become a monk. He wanted to become a monk and serve the abbot from now on, to repay him for saving him. Hua replied that it was all nonsense. Shan was surprised and felt his incredible deep strength. Hua said he was grateful for his desire to become a monk, but he was sure he was not sincere in his desires, and he would quickly get bored. Hua also said that he needed to leave so that he wouldn't get into more trouble. Shan started shouting that he was sincere in his wish. He said that he has visited so many monasteries, but they all see him only as fierce and do not want to accept him. Soon it was the 1st of August. They shouted invitations from everywhere to come and see Shaolin Temple and Fuwang Temple fight. The minister said that with the approval of the Defeng County government, Shaolin Temple and Fuwang Temple will sign a life and death contract, and the losing side will withdraw from Mount Shaoshi. There will be a total of 5 fights, with the winner of 3 receiving a prize. The first fight will be with Li Xian from Fuwang Temple and Iron Bull from Shaolin Temple. The referee shouted that there are no weapons restrictions, no life or death restrictions. The bout begins. The villagers rejoiced that at last it had begun. Some said that the iron bull was very strong and that it could break a boulder as tall as a man with a single blow. Suddenly, Master Li appeared and started shouting that the Shaolin abbot was a fake, compassionate, Buddhist scumbag, and today, Dan Feng would see his true face. Meanwhile, Huo asked that the iron bull play at full strength, do not mess with the opponent and beware of his inner strength. Guan said that Tai Niu was born with divine strength and has a good education in martial arts, and even without inner strength he is good. Guan also said that against Master Li with an average Hotian, he was 70% confident of the Iron Bull's victory. The fight began, the Iron Bull attacking first. However, Master Li was dodging quite clearly. Huo watched from the side and said, did Master Li really have the strength to resist Tai Niu's chaotic fist strikes? Guan said that perhaps he was hiding his strength. After all, he is a mid-back heaven master, so how could he not have something in his arsenal? Guan realized that if his guess was correct, he was afraid that Master Li's killing move would have little effect on Tai, who had never revealed his true strength to him. Meanwhile, Li thought that this reckless man, so tall and powerful, was moving so fast that it was difficult for him to lean forward on his own. Guan realized that Tai seemed to have no inner strength, so he wouldn't be able to win, and if one bypassed him and then used palm strength, one could beat him. Master Li did so. He touched Tai with his hot palm, and he was left with a palm-shaped burn on his shoulder. Master Li started laughing and said that he was just a poor human from the Shaolin temple and nothing more. Suddenly, Tai lost his temper and said that for the sake of Ms., as planned, he had been hiding his power, but he couldn't do it anymore. Iron Bull activated his weapon, and then Master Li stood at a complete loss as to what he should do next. A second later, the Iron Bull struck with its weapon, and the spikes wounded Master Li. Suddenly, Huo intervened. He started shouting for the Iron Bull not to kill Master Li. At this moment, Tai had already swung his weapon. Master Li was standing with his eyes closed and had already said goodbye to his life. But when he opened his eyes, he saw the Iron Bull strike the ground, causing a huge trench to form. And then Master Li thought that he was really trying to kill him. Master Li was overcome with fear. Soon, the referee announced that the first half was over, and the Shaolin had won this fight. The monk helped the injured Master Li leave the arena. The residents applauded at that moment and said that it was amazing. Some said that the Shaolin temple really lived up to its name, and they all knew that Tai would win. Meanwhile, it was said that Tai did well, but he needs to go and treat his wound. Tai asked why the abbot didn't let him kill Master Li. Who replied that it was a simple competition and why kill because of it. Meanwhile, Chen stood to the side and listened and watched everything. It was said that it was already hell for Master Li to be alive. After a while, the referee announced that the second group of opponents would be determined by lot. It was then announced that the second match would be fought, Iron Warrior Chen against Shaolin Master Ichin. They entered the ring, and Chen thought that something he didn't recall Ichin being very strong in martial arts. Guan said that Chen is not very strong, but he is still in the middle stage of Hotian. One in Ichin can go higher. It was said that he had faith in Ichin. After all, he had taken care of him most of all after coming to this world and had taught him the kung fu of the Iron Head and the kung fu of the Dragon Elephant. Meanwhile, Chen started to attack first. Hua thought that from the looks of it, his battle energy was 50% stronger, and he would be able to withstand against Chen. Suddenly Hua noticed that the Iron Bull was heading somewhere. He walked over to the carriage. Then the curtain was lifted by a woman's hand, and Miss Ning could be seen from there. Hua couldn't understand why she was here and why she had called the Iron Bull. Unexpectedly, Hua and Ning's eyes crossed. Hua smiled and immediately brought himself to his senses, thinking that the little girl wanted to test him, but she was very young. Meanwhile, Xiao asked Ms. Ning if Abbott had seen it. Ning replied that he had, but he didn't care. At this moment, Ning thought that there really was such an extraordinary person in the world, and no matter how hard she tried to deceive him, his heart was like iron. Ning ordered the Iron Bull to go back and stay in the Shaolin. Tai replied that he understood. Ning then said that from now on he would be himself and would have nothing more to do with them or his former life. Tai was very surprised, and Ning said that when she returned, she would tell the abbot that after the temple's victory today, she would personally go to the Shaolin and ask the abbot to solve her problems. Xiao asked Ning how she knew the Shaolin would win. The girl replied that it depends on what the abbot wants. And if he wants to win, he will win. Meanwhile, the battle continued, and Hua stood satisfied. He noticed that Kung Fu had increased Ichin's strength, and with the Fuhu fist he had achieved, Ichin had become a master of the martial art. With empty hands, Ichin could easily fight Chin's iron fan, and his fists and punches were flawless. Meanwhile, Chin thought that this monk was very strong, and if he acted in the same manner, he would lose to him. Therefore, Chin decided not to fight him at close range and stepped back. Chin then flew up and pulled out his fan that he was going to attack with. Guan noticed this and said that it was a concealed weapon and it was so sneaky. Ichin is simple-minded and naive, he is rustic and pure, but there are moments when he shows his other side. Such a character would put him at a disadvantage against an opponent who makes good use of concealed weapons. Chin smiled and said that the monk was good and he managed to push him to this level with just external fist techniques. But alas, Shaolin today is doomed to failure. Guan at this moment told Abbott that why don't they admit defeat? After all, they can't afford to lose Iching's life. Meanwhile, Chin held his fan up and said that the poor monk was about to die. But suddenly, with a single movement of his hands, Ichin folded Chin's fan. At that moment, Chin was speechless. And after that, Ichin attacked him and said that he would be the first. From such a blow, Chin flew backwards. Chin was on the edge of the arena, and Ichin ran at him to make a finishing attack. With horror in his eyes, Chin asked why? Ichin asked, wondering why he was still fine after being hit with a hidden weapon. Ichin said that Iron Head Kung Fu was their Abbot's universal martial art, and Ichin couldn't believe that Chin didn't defend against it in a fight with one of the Shaolin. Ichin then attacked and said that if Chin lost, he would have nothing more to say to him. But suddenly, a sword that someone had thrown appeared between Ichin and Chin. No one could understand what was happening. Ichin turned his head, and the sword broke in water. Chai Xian said that they admit defeat, and the young master should be lenient. Immediately, the crowd began to shout that the Shaolin Temple had won. Guan also congratulated the abbot on his victory. Chai Xian looked at Chin and said that the situation now was such that further fighting would not change anything. Then he started yelling that it was all because Chun was too greedy, and he should consider it a lesson he learned by breaking his fate. And also Chai Xian said that he would return to the mountain with him today to train, and he would not be allowed to leave the mountain until he reached great perfection. At this moment, Wu was thinking that after today, the Shaolin would become the only Buddhist temple on Mount Shaoshi, and this would raise the reputation of the Shaolin. Wu then thanked the residents for their support, and said that tomorrow he would lead the Shaolin monk ceremony in the tower, so those who wanted to come could come. The villagers promised that they would come. Soon evening came, and Wu sat quietly in the backyard of the temple. Suddenly, the gate opened and Ning appeared. Wu asked what the reason was for Mrs. Ning to come to his Shaolin again. Ning said that thanks to his guidance, father was feeling better, but there was something else she wanted to ask the abbot's advice on. Wu realized that this woman was very cunning, and her innocent appearance should not deceive him. Wu said that if the mistress trusts him, she can safely speak directly. Ning said that 30 years ago, the divine monk of the Jianhu world sat on Mount Shomuro and left behind a relic. It is said that this relic can cure all diseases in the world, prolong life, and make a person invulnerable to all kinds of poisons. And if consumed, it can even increase a person's inner strength by 1 year. Such an unusual object attracted many people from all over the world to search for it, but they came up with nothing. Ning said that still her father had found a small poem that talked about some martial arts masters. She began to read that the young man knows no sorrow, in a humble room empty-headed, looks through mountain and water with hope. The water is far away, and the sky is high. Was said that Madame Ning is trying to test him, and if he makes a fool of himself now, it's not Madame Ning's fault. Was said that he seemed to have found the answer to this puzzle. Ning asked him to tell him. Then was said the first word of the first line, the second word of the second line, and so on. Then the words combine into one sentence, which sounds like high on Mount Shaomu. And then the last line of the poem should be added. The relics are high on Mount Shaomu. Ning was just surprised. She said that the abbot was so talented that she was ashamed of herself. Wu then said that she thought the relics were on the high part of Mount Shaomu, so she left Tai to look for them. Ning asked not to blame her, but the Iron Bull didn't know about it. But the Huang Tiger did use it to find the relics. Wu remembered that he had seen him sleeping in the forest a few times. Is this tiger really reliable? Wu then asked for Madame Ning to sit down and asked if the relic was very important to her. Ning revealed that when she was young, she was betrothed to the son of a martial arts clan. A few years ago, he was dying of cold poison and relied on the clan elders, which gave him the inner energy to sustain life. Ning didn't want to marry him, so she approached him to talk, hoping to break the engagement. He replied that he and she had been engaged since they were young, and it was not for her to decide that for herself. That's when Ning lost her temper and started yelling that she didn't like him and why she couldn't refuse. The guy said marriage is a matter of parents and matchmakers, so there is no such thing as like or dislike. Ning got angry and said she would never marry him and would ask her father to annul the engagement. The guy said she was naive, and her father's position in the sect was already in jeopardy. And without the support of their sect, he would be snubbed by those who doubt him. He asked Ning how her father can take care of her if he can't even take care of himself. Ning cried and screamed that she didn't like him, and she didn't want him to marry her. Then the guy told her that if she could find a cure for cold poison within 3 years, he would break off his engagement to her. And if not, she will marry him. And so Ning told why she is trying so hard to find a cure for the cold poison, and the relics from Shaolin Mountain are her last hope. It was said that you shouldn't put all your hopes on this relic, as there was more than one cure for cold poison. Hua thought that if there really was a relic in Mount Shaoshi, it was most likely in the hands of a mysterious person deep within the mountain. Hua said that all things in this world are mutually exclusive. There is no poison that cannot be defeated. Ning said that the abbot is truly a supreme monk, and she hopes he can find a solution for her as she is at her breaking point. Hua was horrified. He himself didn't realize how this job had come upon him. Hua said that since she is destined to be married to him, she will have to go through a lot to put an end to it, but if she is determined, she will succeed. At this moment, Hua was thinking that he hoped that the girl realized that if she didn't pay, he wouldn't be able to solve the problem. Ning said that thanks to the abbot's guidance, she plans to stay at the inn at the foot of the mountain and come to the temple every day to offer incense and greet the Buddha, expecting good news from the abbot. Hua said he wasn't sure if it was time to pay for the incense, but as the abbot, he was convinced she should show her appreciation. Meanwhile, Hua grimaced and wondered if he was so stingy and heartless that it was just hopeless. Ning asked what was wrong with him and how he was feeling. Suddenly at that moment a crow flew in and perched on a tree. Meanwhile, in the Zhongyue sect, the monks told the abbot that they could not allow the Shaolin temple to continue as it was. After all, at this rate, they will have hundreds of people in less than 2 months. One of the monks said that he had also heard that the new monks had some skills, and at this rate they would have to cede the name of Mount Shaoshi to them. Temple Abbot Ao Miao said that he knew that. But Shaolin is no longer the same as it was after the Dingfeng ring. He also said that he wasn't sure if he could defeat Shan alone. After all, he's not that easy to deal with. Ao Miao told them to go to the central Chinese branch of the sacred sect and ask people to join forces to destroy Shaolin. The monk was horrified and told the teacher that this is the devil's religion. Ao replied that demon cults are human too, as long as they eradicate Shaolin and pay them. Ao Miao laughed and asked who would know that they did it. Then the monk said that he thought they should first invite the Shaolin to join the alliance. And if they agree, they will not be rivals, and if not, in that case you can resort to other ways. The abbot said that he was a fool, and that they were both sects of Mount Shaoshi, and if the Shaolin joined the Taoist alliance, it would attract the attention of the alliance master, and then things would get even worse. Ao says they can't do what they did before, now they have to do what he orders. Meanwhile, on the back mountain of the Shaolin temple, a white tiger strolled along the forest path in search of a relic. Hua followed the tiger. He couldn't figure out where the hell that stinky tiger was going. As suddenly, Hua saw someone attacking the tiger and said, "How dare the sinful beast come here?" Hua had only intended to follow the tiger, but he didn't expect that he would actually find the mysterious man's hideout deep within the mountain. Hua pondered. The chi wave emitted by his inner strength was able to throw the tiger over 200 feet high. What kind of strength was that? He thought that at the middle Hotian stage, if Hua's internal energy flowed throughout his body, he could also strike with pure internal energy, only it would be underpowered. Then Hua wondered, could it be that the mysterious figure in the depths of the mountain was an innate master? So Hua decided that why don't he go and find out what it was, and in the meantime look for information on relics. Then he discovered a large cave, and suddenly he felt the wind bring a floral scent, though it was like the scent of medicine. Hua thought that this mysterious person was probably making pills in this cave. He went inside and noticed that the tiger was also attracted to the healing scent. Hua noticed that both the cave and the mysterious man looked dangerous. But as the old saying goes, you can't catch a tiger cub without getting into the tiger's den. Hua climbed deeper, through the narrow opening between the rocks. Suddenly he saw something amazing. He didn't know what kind of medicine he was concocting, but the intense aroma was definitely not like what could come from an ordinary potion. Hua took a closer look and couldn't understand why this mysterious man was chained to the huge potion furnace with this strange chain. Hua thought that maybe he had insulted the abbot in his youth. Suddenly, the mysterious man turned around. Hua hid and thought that the chains on this old man were almost 10 feet long, so his range of motion was a circle centered on the furnace. And within the confines of this cave, he could get to anywhere he wanted to go. So Hua decided that he could not go any farther, for he would be discovered. Meanwhile, the man picked up the medicine bottle and threw it around, screaming that the damned beast was trying to steal his medicine again and seeking death. Hua caught that bottle, and when he got up, he saw an old man in front of him. Hua greeted him. The man got angry and started shouting that he was the vulture of the Shaolin temple, and demanded that he give him back his medicine. Hua realized he wasn't going to give it back, so he started running. The old man followed him with his technique. It was so strong and powerful that the rocks in the cave shattered, and Hua barely managed to get his feet out of there. He fell to the ground and said that today he had truly experienced the power of the inner master's palm. He realized that if that palm hit his head, he wouldn't be able to resist it. After all, the difference between internal and external strength was too great. Hua stood up and said that if it wasn't for his agility, he would have been blown to pieces by now. And luckily, the old man couldn't leave the cave and let him take the medicine with him. Hua brought it to the temple, and Guan said that it looked like an elixir, a small pill of the return of the Southern Shaolin. Hua asked what the Southern Shaolin was. Guan told him that there was a very famous temple in the south, also called Shaolin, where monks rarely went for divination or to perform pujas. Their main income is pharmaceutical related. They sell drugs and ask for payment for health care. And if they get rich people, they ask for money. And if they get poor people, health care is free. Southern Shaolin has a good reputation in the region and is never involved in Jianghu affairs. There are 3 very famous medicines in this Shaolin temple. One of them is the golden medicine for external injuries. The second drug is extremely famous in the martial arts world. It is Xiao Hui Dan, which is red in color and has a clear fragrance. People in the jungle often have to pay a high price to get a small rejuvenating pill. The last and most valuable is the Great Revitalizing Elixir. It is said that as long as a person is still breathing, this pill can bring him back to life and is the treasure of the Southern Shaolin Temple. Hua said he didn't expect the old man's pills to be so miraculous, and there were at least 100 jars and wooden boxes in the cave. Hua thought that if he could take this old man for his own use, what wealth that would be. Suddenly, Guan and Hua heard someone outside the gate say that self-cultivation and self-maintenance is not the other shore. And the mind is a snow Buddha who knows that to the left is the western sky, and according to them it's just a way to fool themselves and others. Guan immediately told the abbot that the first thing he needed to do was to get rid of them. Hua replied that he would go meet them, and let Guan go and mind his own business. Hua came out and asked what the teacher was saying. The monk asked in surprise who he was. Hua said he was the abbot of the Shaolin temple. The monk was surprised that he was the abbot, and said that Hua was not even a few years older than his disciple. And so it was not surprising that he had committed such a disreputable act. Meanwhile, the monk's disciple thought that this was the abbot whom people were glorifying. Hua replied that he was confused by his words. Then the teacher monk asked if Hua knew what the other side meant. Hua replied, the world of bliss. The teacher said that if he knew that it was the world of bliss, then he had been reading the sutras for several days. And today he will teach a lesson so that Hua will understand the true meaning of the other shore, and so that he will know that what he does will never reach the other side. It is only by attaining righteousness and realizing the true meaning of Buddhism that Hua can be freed from suffering and reach the other side. Hua smiled and asked the teacher if he was done. At this moment, Hua thought it was another one who wanted to get a smack in the face from him. The teacher replied that he was finished. Then Hua called out to the Su boy, and after a few seconds he came over. Hua said it was one of his students who had only been in Shaolin for a few months and had little exposure to Buddhism in his time. Hua suggested that the teacher talk to him. The teacher began to shout that Hua was being unreasonable and that he knew nothing about Buddhism, so he was putting up the child as a shield. Hua asked, why didn't he first listen to what the Shaolin disciple knew about the other side? Su began to say that the Buddha said that the word Paramitha is a cloud to the other shore. To understand the meaning of separation from birth and death, the realm of birth arises like water, which is called this shore. The realm of birth and death is called the other shore. The realm beyond birth and death is called the other shore. Su said that the abbot taught them that the attainment of righteousness and perfection of virtue leads to the state of nirvana, which is the other shore. Hua said his disciple used to beg for food because he was poor and had a naughty temper. The teacher got angry and asked how dare he call the beggar to humiliate him. The teacher's disciple at that moment thought it was all over as the teacher was very angry. The teacher then said that he had heard the abbot say that Shaolin is the only place where martial arts are practiced. Was said that although their temple hasn't existed for that long, the people are united. But the other day the Shaolin won a tournament in Dengfeng, and this is clear proof. The teacher started laughing and said that what he says, that he can communicate with Buddha, is complete nonsense, and he will always be so arrogant and conceited. Then the teacher told his student to bring his sword. The student was frightened and did not know what to expect. The teacher drew his sword and said that a poor nun of the Yimei Ju Min school was asking him for advice. He then said that this sword is called the Broken Sky. It has been following him for decades and has met quite a few opponents all over Jianghu. Hua realized that it turned out to be one of the 3 most famous swordsmen in the Jianghu Heavenbreaker world, and this person's skills were definitely above Ixuan. Hua realized that although he had cultivated the dragon elephant kung fu and studied the palm of great suffering, he was after all a man of flesh. And if Hua wasn't careful, his life would be over if he faced such a powerful weapon. Then Hua turned to him, calling him Master Ju Ming, said that this was a Buddhist sect and it was not suitable for martial arts. Ju laughed and asked if the abbot was afraid. He said that he was sure that the so-called miracles were a hoax. Hua looked at him and offered to go somewhere else. Ju agreed and said he would see what tricks he could pull off. Hua flew upwards, and the teacher was surprised that this little monk was so good at techniques. The teacher told his student to wait here, and he would come back later. The student realized that the teacher is too arrogant and relies on the fact that Yimei is the biggest school. That's why he is so bossy and rude. This time he was kicked out of Shaolin after he ran into a nail in his humiliation at the foot of the mountain, so he decided to get his face back by coming to Shaolin. The apprentice hoped that the master wouldn't be too humiliated this time, or else he would get angry again. Hua at this moment thought that this old monk was too strong and wielded the Heaven Destruction Sword, so Hua was afraid that the Shaolin martial forces might be gathered just to fight him. But 1 against 1 would be an embarrassment to the Shaolin, and it would be bad publicity. Hua realized that the only way to make the master fight the mysterious old man was to drag him into the battle. Whether the old man defeats the teacher or both are defeated, it will still be to the benefit of the Shaolin. The teacher hasn't caught up with him yet, so there's time to prepare. Hua now realized that he needed to find a way to make the mysterious old man want to fight him. Hua entered the cave and waved his hand for the old man to see him. The old man asked what he was doing here and if the master had sent him to deliver a message. Hua bowed and said that he had specifically come here to ask for the elder's help. The old man started laughing and said that he had locked him in this cave, and now he wanted to ask him for help. Hua said that he doesn't know or care about the old generation's grievances, but he has a way to break this iron chain of Xian. The old man was surprised, and Hua said that the chain was made of a special material that was not afraid of water or fire, was not spoiled by any poison, and could not be cut by any sword or knife. But there is a divine weapon known as the Heaven Destroyer that can break through the iron chain. Hua said that if the old man helped him, he would use the heaven-destroying sword to save him from danger. The old man asked if he was lying to him. Hua said that he was telling the truth, and there was no point in lying. The old man said that if he could rescue him from his predicament, all the pills in this cave would be his, but if he lied. Suddenly Hua told the old man that the teacher was already here. The teacher rushed in and began shouting for the little monk not to run away but to look at the sword. Hua was scared for his life and started to run. He shouted to the old man that now was the time. Suddenly, the old man used the palm technique. The teacher blocked this attack with his sword and said that it was very calculated and sneaky. The teacher then flew up and said that whatever his plan was, he would be able to cut it down with his heaven-piercing sword. The old man said it was pretty good, but not even close to the old him. The teacher did not retreat and began to attack the old man. However, the old man concentrated and showed even more inner strength. Suddenly, the old man managed to make the teacher let go of the sword and Hua grabbed it. Hua grabbed his sword, and after thanking the old man for his help, he immediately started running away from the cave. The old man shouted for him to stand still. Meanwhile, the teacher was thinking about the level of this old man's martial art. The old man began to shout that the little monk had not kept his word, and for that he would kill him. The teacher, meanwhile, also got up and started to leave the cave, but the old man ordered him not to move. The teacher said that this cunning monk not only injured him, but also robbed him of his sword. Now the teacher wants to destroy the Shaolin. Suddenly a palm appeared in front of him, and the old man told him to leave. The teacher did not understand what was happening. And suddenly there was an explosion. The teacher was in the street and saw the young abbot in front of him. His teacher told him that he was the leader of the Yeme gang, and if he died, the gang would not forgive him. Hua said it's not like he wants to kill him, and he's the one looking for misery, and there's nothing more Hua can do. After saying these words, Hua swung his sword and cut the cliff they were standing on. The teacher would fall down and shout that the stinking monk would still answer, and he would definitely come back. Hua said that life and death are in the hands of life, wealth and nobility are determined by God. It didn't matter if the teacher died or not. The important thing was that the sword was now in Hua's hands, and he would have the capital to make a deal with the mysterious man in the depths of the mountain. Hua realized that with the sword, he could free this old man at any time. But this man was too dangerous, and Hua would never act without sufficient certainty. Lastly, Hua shouted to the old man in the cave that the Shaolin would soon open for dinner, and if the old man was late, there would be no food left. The old man shouted that he would definitely kill this bald scumbag. He should just wait for the moment. Hua returned to the temple and suddenly noticed the little nun sleeping under a tree. Hua approached her and asked why she hadn't left yet. The disciple replied that she had fallen asleep. Suddenly, the girl was startled and asked why Duan Tian's sword was in the abbot's hands and where her master was. Hua smiled and asked that since the sword was in his hands, didn't it mean anything? The girl immediately cried, and within seconds she started screaming loudly that he had killed her master. Hua immediately tried to calm her down and told her that no, she had misunderstood him and he hadn't killed her master. However, the girl could not be quiet and cried out that her goldsmith was gone and that he had been cruelly murdered and that he was a poor unfortunate craftsman. Hua sighed and wondered why he was getting such a headache. Then Hua grabbed the girl's hand and said that he didn't kill the master. The girl asked if it was true, and Hua said it was truer than real gold. Hua told her that the old man's palm was very strong and hurt the teacher, and the teacher fell off the cliff and won't recover for another 3 or 5 months. The girl asked where her master was now. Hua said he had come down from the backside of the hill. The girl went over it all again in her head and said that it was the abbot who had thrown the master off the cliff. The girl started sobbing again and said that the poor teacher had traveled such a long way to the Shaolin, and even his body didn't survive. Hua hid behind a tree and asked that she not get on her knees and try to pander to him since he had no morals. The girl looked at him pitifully and asked if he would just tell her where her master had fallen, and she would go get the body. Hua thought that since he became an abbot, he had never been so confused. He is rich in knowledge, but he can't do anything about the crying girl. The residents had already gathered around, and Hua realized that he could not let her cry, as her tears would ruin his reputation, his soul, his good character. Hua went up to her and told her that if she cried again, he would not tell her where her master had fallen and would leave her corpse to be fed to the wild dogs at the foot of the mountain. Hua told her that from now on, she would keep quiet and listen to him. The girl didn't even reply anything. At this moment, she thought that the master wasn't dead after all, and there was a chance to save him. The girl then sat down again by the tree and said that in that case she would stay here and wait for the master to come back for her. Hua explained to her that it was too uncomfortable for a young girl like her to stay in the Shaolin temple, so she should hurry back to Mount Yeme. The girl replied that she didn't know how to get back, and if he had knocked her teacher off the cliff, he should be responsible for her. Upon hearing this, Hua was horrified and said that if he had known that, he would have dropped her too. He realized that he had gotten himself into trouble. Hua remembered that fortunately, Ning, who was expecting news of the relics, was staying at an inn at the foot of the mountain, and entrusting a nun to her was a great idea. However, the trouble didn't end there. A spy was discovered in the temple, and Hua organized the torture. Hua asked as Shan beat the information out of him. Shan asked what his purpose was, and how so in broad daylight he hides in the Shaolin temple to spy on the fair and just good abbot. Shan struggled to get a word out. Hua told him to stop struggling temporarily and let him begin his story. The spy stood up and said that how dare that bald-ass abbot go against their clan, and sooner or later their clan would trample them. Hearing this, Shan gave him a kick from his foot. Suddenly, Shan said that he had not controlled his strength well and nailed him. Was said that it didn't matter, and it was just those Taoist priests from the Zhuanyue clan who had learned that the Shaolin temple was developing too well. Hua ordered that tonight, Shan would throw his body into the Zhuanyue clan's backyard to warn them. Hua also said that Shaolin does not invite offense, but is not afraid of it either. Hua realized that he had just defeated the Fuwang temple and the Zhongyue clan, and wasn't this like a manhwa plot about a flashy man fighting monsters? Hua then laughed and said that he was indeed the protagonist he was destined to be. Suddenly, Hua noticed that there was someone nearby asking for help. Turning around, he saw a girl there. Hua asked her if she was hurt, but at this moment, Hua only thought that this woman looked too seductive. The girl said she had twisted her leg and asked for help. Hua thought that this woman was as beautiful as Ning. However, Hua clearly felt that this woman's motives were impure. He decided to take his time and see what she wanted. Hua asked if she had someone she came with. The girl replied that she had no one and her feet were just sore. Hua moved farther away from her and apologized, saying that she smelled so disgusting that he couldn't help himself. The girl was surprised and asked what she smelled. Hua smiled and said that she seemed confident in her charm. And it was a pity that with such beauty it was impossible to shake his determination to believe in Buddha. Hua said he just wanted to see what she had up her sleeve, but she was too stinky for him to put up with it. The girl got angry and asked if he had just called her an ugly stinker. Hua replied that there is no difference between beauty and ugliness. A face comes from the heart. He said that he had no talent and was not worth her dealing with him. The girl said he speaks so grandly and doesn't care at all, but why doesn't he look back at her? Hua replied that he just didn't want to see dirty things. The girl got angry and walked over to him. Then Hua asked if her legs had gotten better, and if she would be able to walk down the mountain without being carried. Then Hua traveled onward. Suddenly, he whistled and summoned a golden-headed eagle, a product of the system lottery. Hua requested that he follow her and find out who she really belonged to and why she was using charms on him. Sometime later, in the town of Greenfield, Eagle followed the girl and got the information. Meanwhile, Hua thought that he recognized that he was handsome, but not to the point where beautiful women were actively pursuing him. Not to mention she is a superb beauty, perfectly skilled in the art of charm. He realized that someone was up to something and she had been sent to seduce him. Meanwhile, this girl came to the right place and was asked how the mission went. The girl replied that they had taken it too lightly. Hua watched through the eagle and assumed it was her assistant, only where was the person she was corresponding with? Hua was angry as it was completely impossible to hear what they were talking about. Hua suggested that one could go to the corner and eavesdrop, but that would damage his image as an abbot. Suddenly, Hua noticed that this was the same inn where Madame Ning was temporarily staying. Hua realized that this was definitely not a coincidence. He also thought that if he was charmed today and then followed her to the inn, something unpleasant would happen to him.